Chapter 345. Go to watch net. Early the next morning, Li Yundong woke up from his meditation. At this time, Su Chan had already gotten up early with the little foxes. When they saw Li Yundong, they shouted in unison, "Good morning, leader." Although Li Yundong had almost been killed by a sneak attack before, at this time, seeing a group of young and beautiful girls greeting him so crisply in the early morning, even if he was unhappy, it would all be gone. He finally felt that he had not been the leader for nothing. Go to watch net. Early in the morning, there was a group of beautiful girls surrounding him. What more could he ask for in this life? Li Yundong was in a good mood. He greeted them with a smile and said, "You got up so early? Have you packed your luggage?" Su Chan smiled and said, "My luggage has been prepared for a long time. As for the others..." Before she could finish speaking, the other little foxes said one after another, "Leader, we have no luggage. Let's go. We can't wait any longer." "That's right. Leader, we seem to have our own rooms. It's very uncomfortable and inconvenient to squeeze into the living room." "That's right. You even stepped on someone when you got up to go to the toilet." "Hey, second Shiji, the one you stepped on was me. I asked who stepped on me when I was sleeping last night." "Fourth Shiji, you tripped me and I didn't even argue with you. How dare you accuse me first?" "Wow, second senior sister, you're too much. You stepped on my arm until it's bruised. Look. Hey, stop it, you too. Second senior sister, when you fell yesterday it happened to be on my body. It hurt a lot." "That's right. I was also pressed by you. Your chin hurt so much." "Hey, what do you mean? I'm also a victim. If it wasn't for someone pressing on my stomach last night, would I have gone to the toilet?" "What? Who pressed your belly? Who slept next to you last night, second Shiji? Was it you? If it wasn't you, was it you?" The little foxes looked over one by one and shook their heads. Finally, their eyes fell on Li Yundong and they said in unison, "Leader, you be the judge." Li Yundong suddenly felt a headache coming on. It was great to have a group of little beauties surrounding him, but if they were noisy and chattering around him all day, he would suffer. Li Yundong quickly said with a straight face, "Nonsense. We're all from the Fox Zen school, so we should be polite to each other. How can you care about such a thing?" The little foxes all pouted, lowered their heads, looked aggrieved and stopped talking. Li Yundong saw that although they were not convinced in their eyes, they didn't make any more noise. He said, "Well, everyone pack up and get ready to go." As soon as the little foxes heard that they could move to a new home, they were up. Set. Chow Yi Sherbua, who had been watching from the side for a while, suddenly said, "Don't be so happy. You eat and drink for free all day long. You should work harder to help leader share some of his burdens." The little foxes had been with Li Yundong for a long time, and their awe of him had gradually disappeared. Their desire to get close to him gradually grew. They immediately ran up to him one by one with smiles on their faces. "Leader, let me massage your back. Leader, let me massage your back. Leader, let me massage you." Seeing this, Su Chan immediately hugged Li Yundong nervously and looked at them warily. "What do you want? Yundong is mine. Don't touch him." The little foxes said angrily, "Su Chan, you are too overbearing. The leader belongs to all of us. What's wrong with us caring about the leader?" After that, they swarmed up to her and massaged her back and shoulders, trying to please her. Su Chan's fists were no match for 4 hands and she was soon overwhelmed. Li Yundong only felt that all he could see in front of him were snow-white arms. The little foxes were very hot, and their breasts and buttocks were waving in front of him. His nose was full of powder. Li Yundong thought to himself, "Oh my, even the most determined revolutionary soldier will betray us sooner or later. What can I do?" Li Yundong's face darkened, and his voice implied the cultivation method of the mantra Mahamudra. He shouted, "Stand still. How can you be so presumptuous in front of the leader?" Hearing his shout, the little foxes suddenly trembled all over, and their foxy nature was greatly restrained. They all retreated in fear. Seeing this, Chow Yi came up to smooth things over and said, Okay, let's carry some things. It can be considered as helping the leader solve his problems." After that, she opened the door that had been stuffed with tea goods and said, "We've divided the goods inside into bags. Everyone can carry a few bags and try to move them all at once." Li Yundong took a closer look and was shocked. There were 30 or 40 plastic bags here, and each of them was the size of 4 basketballs. With the figures of the little foxes of the Fox Zen school, if they picked up 2 bags, they would be unable to see them. Li Yundong sucked in a breath of cold air. "Where the hell did you guys find so many plastic bags?" Chow Yi smiled and said, "Jinren Ziyuan brought them here." Then she said to the other juniors, "What are you waiting for? Come and get them." After that, she carried 2 bags in each hand. Li Yundong saw that Chow Yi had carried 4 bags, and half of her body could not be seen. She had become extremely cumbersome. He asked in surprise, "Can you afford it?" Chow Yi smiled and said, "Leader, you underestimate us too much. Although our cultivation quotients are low and we can't fight, we can still afford these things." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Seeing that you are all stunning beauties, I forgot that you are all cultivators." "That's right, it's impossible for cultivators to not be able to carry such small things." Li Yundong waved to the little foxes and said, "Little ones, go get your things. Let's go to our new home." The little foxes laughed and agreed. They all rushed to the bags. Some were carrying 2 bags while others were carrying 3. Zhou Qin, who had just come out of the room, was also carrying a bag. At this time, Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling also came. When they saw this, they smiled and said, "It's so lively. Everyone has a share? Well, let's also carry 2 bags, shall we?" As she said this, Zi Yuan also carried 4 bags and Ruan Hongling also carried 2. But when Li Yundong finally wanted to carry, he suddenly found that the last few bags had been carried by Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and the others. He smiled and said, "You've all carried. What should I carry? By the way, I still have some luggage. Let me carry this." At this time, Su Chan immediately jumped over and dragged out the suitcase that had been packed long ago. She said with a smile, "I'll carry it. This is our thing. I want to carry it myself." Li Yundong spread his hands helplessly and said, "You all have things to carry. What should I carry?" Chow Yi laughed and said, "Since you are the leader of the sect, why do you need to carry things? Just leave this kind of thing to us." Li Yundong was a little embarrassed and said shyly, "It's not good to let a group of beautiful women carry things while I, a man, am empty-handed, right?" At this time, Zi Yuan couldn't help but spit with a smile and said, "Bah, look at the corners of your eyes. Don't show off your cleverness here." Sure enough, Li Yundong laughed and waved his hand. "Okay, little ones, let's go." The group of people came out of Hongxing New area. On the way, they made the eyes of passers-by pop out. One by one, they said in shock, "No way, such a large group of beautiful women are holding so many things in their hands and surrounding a man. How could this man be empty-handed? I'm not mistaken, am I? Can this kind of thing exist in today's society? I'm not living in the old society, am I?" When Li Yundong and his group arrived at Riverside New Village, they immediately attracted a lot of people's attention. Fortunately, there were many luxurious houses in this community. Many of the houses were empty houses bought by rich people, but no one lived in them. The occupancy rate was not high, so they did not attract a large number of onlookers. After the group of people entered the room, they divided the rooms. Li Yundong asked for a bedroom on the 2nd floor on the east side of the rooftop. Su Chan and Zhou Qin shared a room downstairs on the west side. Chow Yi of the Fox Zen School lived in the room next to Li Yundong, and the other 4 little foxes lived in the 2 rooms downstairs. Lu Yuehong, Zhuang Yiting, Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and the remaining 3 little foxes lived in the suite next door. As a result, the room suddenly became much more spacious. Now that the little foxes had a new home, they gathered in the living room of Li Yundong's room one by one. They were so excited that they jumped up and down in the room, almost making a ruckus. Seeing that they were excited, Li Yundong didn't want to care about them. It was rare for them to be happy. But not long after, the doorbell rang. With the experience of the last sneak attack, Li Yundong learned his lesson this time. He covered his whole body with zhenqi and opened the door secretly. But as soon as he opened the door, he saw a middle-aged woman wearing a red armband standing at the door aggressively. She looked inside and saw that the room was full of stunning beauties. She was suddenly shocked and scared. She thought that there was some official or rich second generation living in the room with an extremely scary background. The middle-aged woman had originally looked like she was going to interrogate them, but at this time, her momentum dropped. She squeezed out a smile and said, "Hello, I'm from the property office of the community. Someone complained that you were too noisy, so I came up to see if you could be a little quieter." Only then did Li Yundong understand. He laughed and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't manage them well. I'll talk about them in a while." After that, Li Yundong turned around and shouted at the little foxes, "Be quiet. Didn't you see that someone came to complain?" The little foxes were frightened by Li Yundong and immediately quieted down. They stuck out their tongues and made a gesture of silence. Soon the room became quiet. When the middle-aged woman saw that these beauties had immediately quieted down after Li Yundong's shout, she was more and more certain of her thoughts. This young and handsome man must be the children of officials or rich people. I can't afford to offend him. I must avoid him in the future. The middle-aged woman's smile became more and more attentive. Haha, just be careful in the future. There's nothing else. If you have any problems in the future, you can come to our property office. We will definitely help you solve them. Li Yundong smiled and said, Okay. After sending the middle-aged woman away, Li Yundong turned around and said with a straight face, Are you still cultivators? You're just a group of prisoners who have just been released from prison. Especially you, Su-chan. You took the lead in making a fuss. What a disgrace. As soon as Li Yundong scolded them, the little foxes immediately lowered their heads, and Su-chan's chin almost touched her chest. After being reprimanded by Li Yundong, the little foxes watched Li Yundong leave. They looked at each other and said, What should we do? After being scolded by Li Yundong, they lowered their voices as if they were thieves. The little foxes all looked at Su-chan and said, Su-chan, you've been in the mortal world longer than we have. Do you know anything else that's fun? Just as she was about to shout, she remembered what Li Yundong had said just now. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand and whispered in a low voice, I got it. Let's watch soap operas. Su-chan thought for a moment, then her heart skipped a beat and her eyebrows lit up. The little foxes immediately beamed with joy. Okay. Seeing that they were a little happy, Su-chan didn't feel that her voice had become louder again. She immediately made a gesture of silence and said, Don't make any noise. The little foxes responded, Oh. Keep quiet. Su-chan rolled her eyes and said, I'll go ask Yundong and see if he'll let us watch it. As she said this, Su-chan quietly went up the stairs, then tentatively pushed the door open. She poked her head out, rolled her eyes and shouted softly, Yundong. Li Yundong saw Su-chan acting like a thief in the room, and immediately felt angry and amused. He said, What are you doing? Can we watch TV? Su-chan asked meekly. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, Nonsense, just don't make it too loud. Su-chan immediately cheered. Master, you're the best. I love you so much. As she said this, she quickly rushed in, hugged Li Yundong and kissed him hard on the cheek. Then she rushed out like a gust of wind. Li Yundong said with a smile, Hey, you can watch it, but don't make trouble. Be careful not to get complained again. Su-chan's clear voice came from outside the door. Got it? Li Yundong shook his head and couldn't help laughing. He sat cross-legged in the room and was about to chi when suddenly there was a sound of TV music coming from the living room. Li Yundong was dumbfounded when he heard it. He thought to himself, It's fine if you're just watching TV. Find something good to watch but you're actually watching cartoons. It's fine if you're watching cartoons, but you're actually watching such an old cartoon. It's fine if you're watching such an old cartoon, but you're even singing the theme song. Li Yundong only heard a very familiar piece of music coming from the living room. The little foxes hummed along, play with each other, 7 flowers on 1 egg, the desire to commit a crime is great, but you're not afraid, la 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 la. Little brother, play with each other. Little brother, play with each other. Chapter 346. Go to watch net. Li Yundong was stunned as he listened to the voices coming from the living room. He thought to himself, No way. How could they sing such sexy lyrics? Who taught them? It can't be Su-chan again, can it? Li Yundong quickly jumped up, opened the door and went downstairs. At this time he saw that the little foxes had finished singing. They were sitting cross-legged on the ground in a circle, staring at the 47-inch plasma TV in the living room. They didn't even notice Li Yundong's presence. Go to watch net? Li Yundong saw that they all looked innocent and didn't seem to be playing a prank just now. He thought to himself, Who taught them to sing this song? Could it be that I heard it wrong? No, it can't be, right? Li Yundong stood by and watched for a while. Seeing that they were so fascinated that they didn't even notice that he was standing beside them, he thought to himself, Good heavens, if a sneak attack comes, even a child can put you down together. Is this Calabash Brothers so good? Which TV station is so unpromising that it would broadcast such an old cartoon? Li Yundong looked up and suddenly gasped. CCTV Children's Channel. Oh, you guys are a little smaller. At this time, there was a scene of the Calabash Brothers being caught by the snake demon and the scorpion spirit. They took off their pants and peed to tease them. The funniest thing was that there was a small piece of mosaic on the vital parts of the camera. The little foxes suddenly asked curiously, What's that? It's a blurry ball? Next to them, a little fox immediately scolded with a smile, Idiot, it's a man's thing. Don't you know? Oh, then why did it look like this? I don't know. Ask Shiji Su-chan. She has a lot of experience in the mortal world. She must know. Su-chan didn't know what mosaic was. She saw that the little foxes were all looking at her, and she didn't want to show weakness in front of them. She rolled her eyes and immediately saw Li Yundong standing beside her. The little girl seemed to have seen her savior. She smiled and said, "The leader is here. Ask him and let him answer." Li Yundong's face was full of surprise. He secretly glared at Su-chan, coughed dryly and said, This thing is actually called mosaic. It's used to cover, some very sensitive places." Yeah, that's about it." Li Yundong was usually a sharp-tongued and eloquent person. At this time, when he was explaining this question in front of a group of beautiful women, he felt a layer of sweat suddenly appear on his back, and he stuttered. After the explanation, the little foxes suddenly understood. "Oh, so that's how it is." Su-chan's face was also full of sudden understanding, but she soon looked puzzled. She unconsciously looked at Li Yundong's lower body and asked, "But why didn't you censor it?" He wanted nothing more than to grab Su-chan and spank her but 500 times. When the other little foxes heard Su-chan's question, their eyes fell on Li Yundong's lower body in unison. Their eyes were full of ambiguity and they giggled. "Watch net." Li Yundong glared at Su-chan. "Are you a pig? How dare you ask me something like that?" Su-chan looked confused. "Huh? What's wrong with this question? Is there something wrong?" Seeing that she was still at a loss, Li Yundong became more and more frantic. He couldn't help shouting, "How can you ask such a question? You are really a pig, as stupid as a pig." Being scolded by Li Yundong in public, Su-chan immediately pouted and said, "I don't know. If I don't know, I'll ask. What's wrong with that? I'm not a pig." Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. "It would be strange if you weren't a pig. Yes, I'll change your name in the future. I'll call you a pig." Su-chan stamped her feet and said angrily, "You are a pig. I'm not a pig." After venting his anger, Li Yundong laughed triumphantly and said, "Pig monster, you are a pig monster." Su-chan was so angry that she was about to pounce on Li Yundong, but she saw Ziyuan, Ruan Hongling, and the other people of the Fox Zen school jumping over from the balcony. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Can't you go through the door? There is such a thing in this world called a door." Ziyuan smiled slightly and Ruan Hongling made a face at him. "What's the difference? Isn't this also a door? It's just a back door." Li Yundong sighed and said, "The idea of Chinese going through the back door is really deep-rooted even for cultivators. I have no idea." His words made the group of people cover their mouths and laugh. At this time, Zhou Qin, Chao Yi, and the others also came down from upstairs, and the spacious living room suddenly became crowded. Li Yundong looked at Ziyuan and asked, "What are you doing here?" Ziyuan nodded and said, "Yes, we bought the shop yesterday. Why don't we go and get the business license for the shop today? By the way, we can think about what the name of the shop should be." Hearing this, everyone suddenly became excited, especially the little foxes of the Fox Zen school. They began to chatter excitedly. "Hey, what do you think the name of the shop should be?" "In my opinion, it should be called Fox Tea House." "Are you an idiot? Are you afraid that others won't know that it's a tea shop opened by our Fox Zen school? Aren't you afraid that people from other sects will come and make trouble? Let's just call it Rock Tea House. How about using the name of our ancestor to name it? What's so good about it? It's not as good as the previous one. Rock Tea House, how unpleasant it sounds." They kept talking noisily, and Li Yundong couldn't find a chance to get a word in edgewise. Seeing this, Chao Yi coughed dryly to attract the attention of the little foxes. Then she scolded them, "What are you doing? Is it up to you to decide on a name? Of course it's up to the leader." Li Yundong laughed and said, "It doesn't matter. Let's express our opinions one by one. We'll choose the best one when the time comes. Let's go." 7 KOM. Li Yundong looked at Ziyuan and said, "Ziyuan, you've contributed the most to the whole thing. What do you want to name it?" Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "I haven't thought about it either. Why don't you name it?" Li Yundong looked at Ruan Hongling again and asked, "Hongling, what do you want to name it?" Ruan Hongling didn't stand on ceremony. After thinking for a moment, she said, "I remember when Sister Ziyuan went on stage to perform the tea art last time. The scene was really full of clouds and mist, like a fairyland on earth. I think we should call it Yunwu Tea House." After she finished speaking, Li Yundong laughed and said, "Yunwu is a kind of tea. If you name it like this, people who really want to drink tea will think that you only buy Yunwu tea here." Ziyuan smiled and teased, "Then we should call it Guanyin Tea House. Most of our tea is Tiguanyin tea." Ruan Hongling said angrily, "You want me to name it again. After I give it a name, you join hands to laugh at me. It's really a case of a husband and a wife following each other. You're so annoying. Ziyuan suddenly blushed and glared at Ruan Hongling angrily. Li Yundong also looked very embarrassed. He coughed dryly and quickly changed his target. He looked at Zhou Qin and said, Zhou Qin, do you have any good ideas? Zhou Qin smiled and said, what good ideas do I have? Seeing that she was unwilling to say anything, Li Yundong knew that Zhou Qin had just started cultivating, so she seemed very cautious, for fear of saying something wrong. He smiled and didn't force her. He looked away again. Su Chan couldn't hold it in any longer. She raised her hand high and shouted, I have a good name. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at her. Pig monster, shut up. You're too stupid. We don't want to hear your name. Su Chan's face suddenly fell. She shouted angrily, you're so annoying. You're the pig monster. Li Yundong held back his laughter and deliberately avoided looking at her. Then he looked at Chao Yi and said, Chao Yi Sherbua, what name do you think we should give it? Chao Yi smiled and said, Leader, this is your shop. It's not up to us to give it a name. Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, you can't say that. This is also our Fox Zen school. Oh no, it's a joint business between our Fox Zen school and the Linggong sect of Jingyi school. Since our Fox Zen school has a share, you also have a share. Chao Yi Sherbua, you don't have to be so polite. Seeing that she couldn't refuse, Chao Yi thought for a moment and said, since it's a tea house and it's in the middle of a secular city, I think we might as well give it an elegant and popular name. Why don't we call it Linxian? Lu Yuehong, who was standing next to her, suddenly smiled. Linxian is indeed not bad. It means that you are about to ascend to heaven after drinking tea, but I think it's better to call it ascending to immortality. Zhuang Yiting also said, I think it's best to call it Tongxian. Lu Tong of the Tang dynasty once wrote a poem. 1 bowl of tea to moisten the throat, 2 bowls to break the loneliness, 3 bowls to search the withered intestines, and only 5,000 volumes of words. 4 bowls of sweat. All the injustices in my life will disperse into my pores. 5 bowls of muscle and bone cleansing, and 6 bowls of Tongxian spirit. It's called Tongxian, which is poetic. It's popular and elegant. Isn't it just right? After she finished speaking, Li Yundong immediately clapped his hands and praised, good. Sherbua Zhuang Yiting is really well read. This name is good. At this time, Zhou Qin, who had been unwilling to express her opinion, also nodded slightly. She added, the shop we rented is quite large. I think we can set up 3 tea houses, one called Linxian, one called Ascending to Immortality, and one called Tongxian. These 3 names represent the 3 realms of tea drinking. It's just right to set up a 3-level VIP tea house, with Tongxian being the highest and the tea inside being the best, and so on. What do you think? Li Yundong looked at her with appreciation and said, not bad. You are indeed a girl from a noble family. It's a good idea to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Zhou Qin was encouraged and secretly rejoiced. She then said, we can also set up 3 VIP cards, similar to silver cards, gold cards, and diamond cards. The level of customers will be determined by their consumption. After she finished speaking, the others all praised her. This decision respected the opinions of the 3 seniors of the Fox Zen School and clearly differentiated the management method of the tea house. Ziyuan glanced at Zhou Qin and said with a smile, this is really a good idea. Li Yundong, you have accepted a good disciple. Chao Yi also smiled and said, now that leader has such a capable disciple, he doesn't need us anymore. Zhou Qin smiled modestly and said, you flatter me, everyone. I just summarized everyone's ideas and synthesized them. There's nothing to boast about. Li Yundong laughed and said, okay, stop flattering each other. It's settled. Ruan Hongling suddenly asked curiously, what's settled? It's the names of the 3 tea houses, not the tea house. Can't the 3 names be hung outside the tea house at the same time? Wouldn't that be a mess? Hearing her words, everyone finally reacted and looked at each other in dismay. Li Yundong also said in a low voice, yes, I wouldn't have thought of it if you hadn't mentioned it. Su Chan, who was standing to one side, finally seized the opportunity and taunted Li Yundong proudly. Look, you call me a pig. I think you are the pig. Stupid. Li Yundong glared at her and said, yes, I am a pig. It would be strange if you were a pig. Pig monster, do you have any good ideas? When Su Chan saw Li Yundong talking about her like this in front of so many people, she stamped her feet angrily and said, you are a pig monster. Li Yundong laughed and said, then you give me a good name. I will admit that you are not a pig monster. Ziyuan and the others saw Li Yundong and Su Chan bickering. Li Yundong's every word was taking advantage of Su Chan, But Su Chan didn't react and just foolishly followed Li Yundong's words. They all covered their mouths and snickered. Su Chan didn't realize that Li Yundong was teasing her. When she saw Li Yundong asking her to give him a name, she was overjoyed. She put her hands on her hips and said proudly, "You finally remembered to give me a name? With this girl's intelligence, wisdom, and vigor, I will definitely come up with a good name." Li Yundong held back his laughter and said, "Yes, yes, Miss Pig Monster, hurry up and give us a name." Su Chan stamped her feet and shouted, "Don't call me Pig Monster." Li Yundong laughed so hard that his intestines were about to break. He said, "Okay, I will definitely not call you Pig." Su Chan didn't hear the change in the meaning of Li Yundong's words. Seeing that Li Yundong was no longer speaking, she shook her head and said, "Previously, the three Sherbua said that there were three immortals, one Lin Xian, one Deng Xian, and one Tong Xian. In my opinion, we might as well call our tea house Desangxian." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, "Desangxian? Isn't that a dish? Why do you only know how to eat? How can you say that you are not a pig? If you are not a pig, then what are you? By the way, you are not a pig. It would be strange if you were a pig monster." Su Chan only felt that the name she had given was excellent. Originally, she looked at Li Yundong expectantly, waiting for him to praise her. Unexpectedly, Li Yundong ridiculed her in such a way. She suddenly became flustered and angry and shouted, "It would be strange if I wasn't a pig monster." This time, everyone in the room burst out laughing, and Li Yundong laughed so hard that he almost died. Su Chan looked at everyone laughing. She was stunned and hadn't come to her senses yet. She only felt wronged and sad in her heart. I gave myself such a good name. Why are they still laughing at me? Especially Yundong, who took the lead in laughing at me. Su Chan felt wronged in her heart. She was really more wronged than Doi. Her eyes were full of tears, her nose twitched, and she burst into tears. She choked and said, "It would be strange if I wasn't a pig monster. Under the care of my wife, I'm much better. Thank you for your concern." Chapter 347. Go to watch net. Everyone in the room laughed so hard that they fell down. Li Yundong laughed so hard that he didn't even have the image of a leader. He held his stomach and rocked back and forth, completely heartless. Go to watch net. Zhou Qin saw more and more tears in the girl's eyes. It was obvious that she was about to cry. Zhou Qin held back her laughter, walked over, and whispered a few words in Su Chan's ear. Su Chan realized that she had fallen into Li Yundong's trap. She had admitted that she was a pig. Her eyes suddenly went blank. After a while, her face turned red. She pounced on Li Yundong, baring her teeth and brandishing her claws. "You're so annoying. You're a pig." Li Yundong laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. Su Chan pounced on him, scratching and biting him. He quickly begged for mercy. Okay. You're not a pig. I'm a pig." Su Chan was so angry that she shouted, "You're still taking advantage of me?" After that, she pounced on Li Yundong's back like an octopus and bit his ear with her teeth. Li Yundong put his palms together and smiled. Okay, I was wrong. Don't make trouble. Hurry up and get down. We still have business to talk about." Su Chan knew when to stop. She snorted and said arrogantly, "I'm not getting down. You bully me, I'm going to bully you too. You can talk behind my back." Li Yundong threatened her with a straight face. "If you don't get down, I'll spank you." Su Chan thought to herself, "Anyway, I just lost face. Now, no matter what you say, I won't get down." She put her arms around Li Yundong's neck and buried her head in his broad back. I won't get down," she said shamelessly. Li Yundong was at his wit's end. He couldn't really spank her in front of so many people, could he? Li Yundong smiled helplessly at the people in the room. He straightened up and coughed as if he was carrying a big doll on his back. In the room, everyone from the Fox Zen school looked at Li Yundong strangely. They were all trying hard to hold back their laughter. Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, "In fact, to be fair, the name of the shop that Su Chan just mentioned is actually quite good. Desangxian. First, it's homophonic. Second, it's loud. Third, it's very elegant. Fourth, it's very suitable for our shop. It's indeed a good name. I suggest using this name." As soon as she spoke, Ruan Hongling naturally responded, "I also agree." Chao Yi and the others from the Fox Zen school also nodded. "Yes, it's a good name. Watch net. 7 KOM. Su Chan poked her head out from behind Li Yundong and said proudly, "What do you think? I told you I was the one who came up with the name." Li Yundong turned his hand back and made a Mahamudra. With a snap, he slapped the girl's buttocks hard. Su Chan let out a loud cry, immediately attracting everyone's attention. The little girl blushed with shame and shrank her head back. Li Yundong carried the little girl on his back, his expression unchanged. He pretended that nothing had happened. He made a decision and said, "Okay, that's the name." Zhou Qin also laughed. "I know a good calligrapher. When the time comes we can ask him to write a few words and then mount them. Then we'll have our own plaque." Everyone praised him in unison, but Li Yundong smiled and said, No, why spend money to hire someone if we don't use the great calligrapher in front of us?" Zhou Qin asked curiously, "Is there a great calligrapher among us?" Li Yundong looked at Ziyuan with a smile. "I saw Ziyuan's calligraphy last time and it was very good. I wonder if she's willing to write it?" Ziyuan immediately remembered that when she was writing the Psalms, she had been in a daze and had been seen by Li Yundong. Her heart tightened, and her expression became a little unnatural. Ruan Hongling didn't know the crux of the matter. She immediately clapped her hands and said with a smile, Good, my Shiji's calligraphy is ranked among the best in the cultivation world." At this time Su Chan poked her head out again, but she was not as arrogant as last time. She said weakly, "My calligraphy is also very good." When Li Yundong had reunited with Su Chan in Shantang, he had seen her calligraphy, and it was indeed very beautiful. Li Yundong was well aware of this, but he wanted to make fun of the little girl, so he sighed and said, "Alas, in fact, your calligraphy is also very good. It's just a little bit worse than Ziyuan's." Su Chan was obviously very proud of her calligraphy. Seeing that Li Yundong's tone was a little strange, she said unhappily, "How much is a little bit worse?" Li Yundong put his thumb and index finger together, leaving only a little gap, and then pretended to say, "Just a little bit worse. Go to the internet." 7 KOM. Seeing that Li Yundong finally didn't taunt her anymore, Su Chan snorted and said, "Does it count as a little bit worse?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "Yes, in fact, it's just a little bit worse. Alas, it's a pity. It's probably just a little bit worse, a little bit worse." Suddenly, everyone burst into laughter again. Su Chan was so angry that she shouted, "You're bullying me again. I don't care, I also want to write." It was rare for the little girl to be so serious. In her opinion, the startup capital of this tea house was earned by Li Yundong and Ziyuan together, and the management method and direction of opening the tea house were all Zhou Qin's ideas. Of these two women, one was Li Yundong's confidant who was both a teacher and a friend, and the other was Li Yundong's first disciple. Not only was their beauty and temperament not inferior to hers, but their relationship with Li Yundong was also very ambiguous. If the little girl didn't feel a little jealous in her heart, it would definitely be a lie. The most important thing was that, in the little girl's opinion, if she, as his real girlfriend, couldn't leave her mark on the first bucket of gold in Li Yundong's life and couldn't help him at all, even if Li Yundong didn't have any ideas, she would definitely feel regret and be very sad when she thought about it in the future. Li Yundong froze for a moment when he saw the serious look on Su Chan's face. Then he smiled and said, "Well, to be fair, let's have a fair competition later. Everyone writes, and whoever writes the best will get to use their words. What do you think?" Chow Yi smiled and said, "Leader, you make the decision. You can use whoever you think is better." Li Yundong saw that as soon as he said this, the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were also tempted, and their eyes were shining. He smiled and said, "Don't be a dictator. Everyone writes. The eyes of the masses are bright. It's not just my empty words. Come on, who has a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone? Hurry up and bring them up." Coincidentally, the Fox Zen school didn't have much luggage, but they had lived in seclusion in the Taoist temple before. Most of them had practiced writing to cultivate their moral character, so they happened to have these things in their luggage. Soon the little foxes took out the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone as if they were asking for credit. Li Yundong pointed to the desk in the dining room next to him and said, "Let's write there. Who wants to go first?" The little foxes were all excited. Me. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Don't shout, don't push. Do it one by one." The little foxes rushed to write the words de sanction one by one, and then showed them to Li Yundong one by one. When they got a word of praise from him, they stood to the side with smiles on their faces. At first, Su Chan looked at them nervously, for fear that their handwriting would surpass hers. But when they finished writing, Su Chan suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and felt proud in her heart. "Fortunately, I used to practice writing with my master a lot. Otherwise, I would have made a fool of myself today. Although the handwriting of my fellow sisters is good, there is still a gap between them and mine." When Chow Yi and the others finished writing one by one, Su Chan felt even more relieved. She saw that although Chow Yi and Lu Yuehong's handwriting was beautiful, it was not as lively as hers. It lacked a certain charm. On the contrary, Shibui Zhuang Yiting, who looked the most coquettish, had written a delicate and fresh thin golden body, which surprised everyone. Li Yundong saw that everyone's handwriting was different and beautiful. Although he didn't understand calligraphy, he also felt that all the words were extremely beautiful. He nodded and praised, "Not bad, they are all good handwriting. I didn't expect that all of you would have good handwriting." He looked up at Ruan Hongling and said, "Hongling, don't you want to write?" Ruan Hongling responded and was about to pick up the brush to write, but as soon as she did so, she seemed to think of something. She asked with a smile, "Jinren, as the leader of the sect, why don't you write?" Li Yundong shook his hands and said, No, I can draw talismans but I can't write anything." Ruan Hongling didn't believe him. She snorted and said, "Is it because your identity is different now, so you don't want to do it easily?" As soon as she said this, the others also joined in. "Leader, write one." Li Yundong couldn't refuse, so he made up his mind, rolled up his sleeves and said loudly, "Well, since you are willing to die, I am willing to bury you. Prepare to stab your own eyes later." Hearing this, everyone laughed, but they became more and more curious, so they all came forward to watch. They saw Li Yundong pick up the brush and calmly draw a circle on the rice paper. Moreover, the circle was irregular. They were suddenly speechless and thought, "What is this?" After a while, Li Yundong picked up the brush again and drew another circle. This time the circle was long and had a strip on it. Everyone was confused and became more and more confused. They began to discuss, "What is the leader writing?" Su Chan even giggled and said, "Yundong, are you really drawing talismans?" Li Yundong ignored her and finally drew another circle. This time this circle was larger than the previous two, and it had a big tail and a small head. There was also a strip on the head. After Li Yundong finished drawing, he threw the brush and said loudly, "Well, I'm done. You can stab your own eyes." Ruan Hongling was confused. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? What are you writing? Which language is it? Is it Martian language?" Su Chan giggled and said, "That's right. If you want us to stab our own eyes, we have to be convinced." Li Yundong glared at her and then said to Ruan Hongling in surprise, "Oh, you know Martian language. You're quite fashionable." Ruan Hongling rolled her eyes at him and said, "Tell me, what are you writing?" Li Yundong proudly pointed to the first irregular circle and said, "This is a potato." Then he pointed to the second smaller circle with a strip and said, "This is a pepper." Then he pointed to the last one and said, "This is an eggplant." Li Yundong clapped his hands and said, "Isn't this the authentic San Xian?" Before he could finish his words, everyone was already laughing. Su Chan even covered her stomach and laughed exaggeratedly. "Oh my god, I really have to stab my own eyes. This is too ugly." Li Yundong said exaggeratedly in a loud voice, "What do you know? This is the painting method of calligraphy, the calligraphy method of painting. It can be called a peerless work of calligraphy and painting." Su Chan smiled and rushed over to snatch the painting, which looked like a talisman, and hid it behind her. "Well, then I'll collect your work and leave it for your disciples and grand-disciples to see in the future. I'll let them see the calligraphy of their grandmaster and the leader, so that they can worship it in the future." Li Yundong was so angry that he scolded with a smile, "Little girl, if you have the ability, don't make any mistakes later. Otherwise I'll beat your ass. How dare you laugh at the leader?" Su Chan jumped up and snorted. "I'll write it. Well, I'll make a small adjustment. The 3 chapters this week will be concentrated in 234, which means that tomorrow, I'll continue with the 3rd chapter. Chapter 348. Go to Watch Network. Su Chan picked up the brush and stood in front of the table. She closed her eyes for a while and waited for the laughter to stop. Then she opened her eyes and wrote the words "Desanxian" with a solemn face. Everyone took a look and saw that Su Chan's handwriting was beautiful, and her strokes could be said to be smooth and free. There was a kind of indescribable intelligence and elegance. Except for Li Yundong's bad handwriting, everyone else present was good at it. When they saw this good handwriting, they all cheered. Su Chan proudly put down the brush and said to Li Yundong with a smile, "How is it?" Li Yundong praised her in his heart, but pretended to be angry and glared at her. "What are you so proud of? There are still 2 more to write." Li Yundong said to Zhou Qin, "My good disciple, it's your turn. Hurry up and support me." Zhou Qin thought of the San Xian that Li Yundong had used just now, and she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Li Yundong said angrily, "Hey, are you kidding me? How dare you laugh at your master?" Zhou Qin quickly smiled apologetically and said, "No, how dare I?" Li Yundong looked at her suspiciously and said, "Really? How is your handwriting? If it's the same as mine, don't make a fool of yourself. Zhou Qin pursed her lips and said with a smile, it's just us. I'm just a little better than you. Su Chan immediately chimed in, just a little bit stronger. That little bit is like a world of difference. Everyone laughed. Li Yundong laughed and scolded, you little girl, you're waiting for me here. After laughing for a while, Zhou Qin walked to the table, concentrated, and then wrote the words Desanxian. At this time, everyone understood her background. They knew that Zhou Qin was originally an official's daughter, and later gave up everything to cultivate with Li Yundong. They had thought that Zhou Qin's calligraphy cultivation should be limited, but at this time, they saw that Zhou Qin was writing in semi-cursive script. Her handwriting was dignified and steady, majestic, and her words were strong and powerful, revealing an unbending momentum. Su Chan sighed in her heart and couldn't help but admire Zhou Qin a little more. She thought to herself, as the saying goes, the handwriting is like the person. Only a person who can write like this can do such a thing. Ziyuan also nodded and praised, good calligraphy, it is indeed good calligraphy. However, although the calligraphy is good, the craftsmanship is too heavy. It's not as nimble as Su Chan's. Zhou Qin also put down the brush and said with a smile, of course. Su Chan's words seem to be alive as if they can jump out. I can't compare with her. Su Chan was overjoyed when she heard that. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. At this time, everyone except Ziyuan had finished writing. Li Yundong smiled and said to Ziyuan, it's your turn, isn't it? Ziyuan waved her hand and said, no, just use Su Chan's handwriting. Her handwriting is very good. Li Yundong smiled and said, excessive modesty is equal to arrogance. Everyone has written but you don't. Are you looking down on us? Ziyuan smiled helplessly and said, well, then I'll embarrass myself. After saying that, she walked to the table, grabbed her sleeve with one hand, and gently grabbed the brush with the other. Li Yundong saw that her posture was elegant, and the hand holding the brush revealed a part of her wrist. Her skin was really as white as snow. Before she started writing, there was a different kind of charm that went straight into people's hearts. Ziyuan composed herself and then wrote 3 words on the paper. When everyone looked at them, they saw that the 3 words were really like dancing dragons and phoenixes. They were immortal and elegant, and there was a kind of otherworldly aura between the lines. Everyone was a knowledgeable person, so they all cheered loudly. Zhou Qin praised, these 3 Desanxian characters are the real immortals. They are really peerless and make people feel relaxed and happy. Su Chan was still a little unconvinced. She picked up Ziyuan's words and looked at them. She glanced at the back of the paper and saw that her own words were also clearly printed below. She flipped through a few more pages and saw that the handwriting below was also very clear. Su Chan was immediately convinced and sighed, Zhenren Ziyuan is indeed the future leader of the Linggong sect. Not to mention her cultivation, her handwriting is really powerful. Amazing. Su Chan turned to Li Yundong and said sincerely, Yundong, you can use Zhenren Ziyuan's words. Her handwriting is indeed better than mine. Li Yundong chuckled and stroked her head. Are you sure? Su Chan nodded. Although she was smiling, there was a trace of sadness in the corner of her eyes. When Li Yundong saw this, his heart skipped a beat. After waiting for everyone to discuss for a while, he saw that Su Chan had found an excuse to return to her room, so he also quietly hid Su Chan's words and went to her room. When Su Chan saw Li Yundong come in, she was stunned, and then she pouted and said, Are you here to laugh at me? Laugh, laugh, I'm not as good as you. Li Yundong walked over with a smile, hugged the little girl, and then let her sit on his lap. Then he hugged her tightly and kissed her. Li Yundong said softly, Silly girl, look at what this is. After that, he took out a folded piece of paper. Su Chan looked at it and saw that it was the calligraphy she had written. She said unhappily, Isn't it just the calligraphy I wrote? It's not as good as Zhenren Ziyuan's and it can't be used as a plaque. What are you doing with it? Are you making fun of me? Li Yundong said gently, Silly girl, although Zhenren Ziyuan's calligraphy is good and can be used to mount a plaque, it was chosen by everyone. In my heart, I like your calligraphy the most. Su Chan was stunned and looked at Li Yundong in confusion. What? My calligraphy is not as good as Zhenren Ziyuan's? Li Yundong laughed and scratched the tip of Su Chan's nose. You're so stupid. Because these words were written by you, I like them the most. It's one thing to think who wrote the best, but it's another thing to like whose calligraphy is the most. Su Chan was very moved when she heard this. She looked at Li Yundong with tears in her eyes and said, Yundong, you are so kind to me. As she said this, she fell into Li Yundong's arms as if she wanted to melt into his body. Li Yundong held Su Chan in his arms and said with a smile, "Are you very touched?" Su Chan raised her head, wiped away her tears and nodded vigorously. "Yes." Li Yundong spread out the palm of one hand. "Then give me back my ghost talisman, will you?" Su Chan suddenly smiled through her tears and struggled to get up from Li Yundong. "Well, it turns out that you want your ghost talisman. No, this is my family heirloom. I want to pass it down from generation to generation." Li Yundong hugged Su Chan and didn't let her run away. He scolded with a smile, "Stinky girl, how dare you go against me? I'll fight you to the death today." The two of them laughed for a while and Li Yundong finally made Su Chan happy. When the two of them went downstairs together, the unhappiness in Su Chan's heart had disappeared. Li Yundong said to Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, "Since the name of the shop has been decided, I think it's better for us to split up. We'll go to the shop and we'll go to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce to register. What do you think?" Ziyuan nodded and said, "Okay, let's do that." Zhou Qin took the initiative to volunteer. "Then I'll go to the Industry and Commerce Bureau. After all, I'm more familiar with it." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Even if you didn't say it, I would have let you go. There are so many people here and you know these things the best. If you don't go, who will?" Zhou Qin pursed her lips and smiled. "Then I'll go in a while." Li Yundong nodded. "Okay, let's go to the shop later and discuss how to decorate it." After the discussion, Li Yundong, Ziyuan, Ruan Hongling, and a large group of people from the Fox Zen School went to the pedestrian street in a mighty manner. Since the shop had been emptied, Li Yundong had already received the key after signing the rent contract yesterday. After entering the door, the group of people began to discuss how to decorate and design the shop. While they were discussing in full swing, a few people were looking at the shop from a distance on the pedestrian street. These people were all wearing ordinary clothes, but one of them was short and fat. It was the disciple of the Jingyi school who had gone down the mountain with Zhang Tianhe and dragged the iron tower. The other was a beautiful young woman, Zhou Ping. Standing beside Zhou Ping was a tall and thin young man. Although his appearance was ordinary, he had an extraordinary bearing and his eyes were like lightning. The young man looked at the shop and chuckled. "Shimmy, is this the Jinrenli who has repulsed all the major sects? He doesn't look like it. How high can his cultivation be if he hangs out with a bunch of vixens? I'm afraid he doesn't live up to his name, does he?" Zhou Ping snorted coldly. "Shi Xiang, although this guy is greedy and lustful, his cultivation and kung fu are not fake. Shi Xiang Huyen, don't you think so?" The disciple named Huyen said in a deep voice, "Shiji, Zhou Ping is right. This person's cultivation can't be underestimated. Shi Xiang, you have to be careful." The young man still had a look of disbelief on his face. He sneered and said, "Rolling around in a pile of women all day long, no matter how powerful he is, there's definitely a limit. I'm afraid that even his Naiden is a fake one. Hey, Zhang Tianhe actually lost to such a guy. In a while, I will burst the myth of his first place." Previously, when Ziyuan was known as the #1 expert of the younger generation in the cultivation world, almost all cultivators gave her some face. Even young people with great shintong didn't compete with her for the first place. First, they admired her beauty and temperament. Second, Ziyuan's own strength was amazing. Third, even if they won, it would not be glorious. But now that the halo of first place had fallen on Li Yundong, countless young cultivators immediately became restless. This young man was none other than Zhang Tianhe's direct disciple. His name was Wang Lingfei and he was Zhang Tianhe's Shixiang. His cultivation was not inferior to Zhang Tianhe's, but because Zhang Tianhe was Zhang Tianhe's son, Zhang Tianhe's status in the sect was far higher than his. Wang Lingfei had always looked down on his Shixiang. He had received all the benefits, learned all the good cultivation methods and eaten all the elixirs, but in the end his cultivation was not as good as Wang Lingfei's. When Wang Lingfei heard that Zhang Tianhe had been defeated by Li Yundong in one move, he gloated even more in his heart. He thought to himself, Zhang Tianhe was defeated in one move. If I can defeat Li Yundong, not only will I become famous in one battle, but I will also prove myself in front of the leader. Why not? Zhou Ping saw what he was thinking, and with a little encouragement Wang Lingfei followed her. When Zhou Ping saw that Wang Lingfei was so arrogant that he even belittled Zhang Tianhe, whom she had a crush on, she was displeased. She curled the corner of her mouth and looked disapproving, but this expression only flashed and quickly disappeared from the corner of her mouth. She laughed and said, Shi Xiang, we will support you. The young man snorted. Why do I need you to support me? I can do it alone. Just as he was about to step forward, he suddenly saw 4 young men who looked like gangsters push open the door and enter the shop. The young man was stunned. Seeing that there were secular mortals inside, he stopped and wanted to wait for them to leave. After these young hoodlums entered the store, they were immediately stunned by the number of beautiful women in the store, and their saliva flowed 3 feet long. Li Yundong saw that these people had colorful heads and were dressed like hooligans. Their eyes were greedy and lustful, as if they wanted to swallow all the beautiful women in the room. He was secretly unhappy and shouted in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Li Yundong's shout, which contained the mantra Mahamudra, shocked the gangsters back to their senses. A yellow-haired gangster with a head like a chicken coop wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth, put his hands on his hips, and said to Li Yundong arrogantly, "Hey, who's the boss here?" Li Yundong and Ziyuan looked at each other and Ziyuan nodded. Li Yundong understood and cupped his hands. "I am. What's the matter?" The yellow-haired gangster shouted, "It's nothing. I just want to tell you that you have to pay a monthly protection fee here in the future." When Li Yundong heard this, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What? Pay a monthly protection fee? Who do you think you are? Do you think this is the old society? Do you think this is Hong Kong? Do you think you're Wenchang?" The other people of the Fox Zen school also felt strange and thought to themselves, "What a reckless thing. He actually tried to extort our leader. Do you want to die?" Chapter 349. Go to watch net. Li Yundong couldn't help but raise his head and laugh. As soon as he laughed, the others of the Fox Zen school also laughed. Go to watch net. The 4 gangsters were confused by Li Yundong's laughter. They looked at each other and one of the gangsters standing behind whispered, "Boss, they don't look like ordinary people. Let's get out of here, shall we?" The yellow-haired man felt uncomfortable by the laughter of Li Yundong and the others. He glared at his companion and said, "Bullshit. Do you want me to spit out the money I've swallowed?" When the man heard this, he shrank his head and stopped talking. Most of the gangsters had good eyesight, especially if they wanted to stay in the underworld for a long time. It didn't depend on whose fist was fiercer, but whose eyesight was better. Otherwise, no matter how good they were at fighting, they would either be caught or forced to run away in a few days. How could they survive? The yellow-haired man was obviously such a person. Seeing Li Yundong's extraordinary bearing and the beautiful women around him, he thought to himself, "Damn it, this bastard actually asked me to step on a landmine." *CK. However, he was reluctant to spit out the money he had swallowed. The yellow-haired man's heart skipped a beat. He glared at one of the men beside him and said in a low voice, "You go and scare them." This man had a Mohican hairstyle. When he first entered the door, he had been arrogant, but now he saw that most of the people in Li Yundong's group were stunning beauties. When they saw him, not only did they not scream in fear but they also laughed loudly. His laughter was full of contempt. He was not a fool. Naturally, he knew that he had provoked someone he couldn't afford to offend, so his momentum had weakened a little. At this time, when he heard his big brother ask him to stand up for them, he was shocked and said with his eyes wide open, I will go?" The yellow-haired man glared at him. "Do I have to go by myself?" Mohican said with a sad face, "Big brother, why don't you go by yourself?" The yellow-haired man said angrily, "Nonsense, are you the big brother or am I the big brother?" Mohican choked and said, "Big brother, since you are the big brother, you should bear the burden for the younger brothers." The yellow-haired man glared at him fiercely. *CK. If the big brother has to do everything by himself, then who will be the big brother? Do you still want to stay in this world? Mohican had no choice but to take a deep breath, pull out a brick from behind him and shouted fiercely, "Fuck you. Let me tell you, if you don't pay the protection fee on time every month or else." Li Yundong didn't get angry. He looked at them with a smile and said, "Otherwise what?" Mohican swallowed his saliva and shouted, "No matter what you do here in the future, don't even think about stopping." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Chan and the others giggled again, as if they had heard the funniest joke. Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Who sent you here?" Mohican was stunned and involuntarily looked at the yellow-haired man. The yellow-haired man kicked him angrily and scolded, "I'm not afraid of you. Are you afraid of me?" Mohican summoned up his courage again, glared at Li Yundong and shouted, "It's none of your business. If you don't pay the protection fee, I'll smash your shop." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Well, I'm just going to renovate it. Hurry up and smash it. If you smash it, I can save my wages." Mohican was dumbfounded. He had seen all kinds of people, including those who were shameless and arrogant, but he had never seen such a well-dressed man who was surrounded by beautiful women and was so unscrupulous. He unconsciously looked at the yellow-haired man again, and the yellow-haired man was frightened by his gaze. He thought to himself, "In my impression, Aren't rich people afraid of hooligans? Is it because there are so many beautiful women around that they have to be tough? Well, it's very likely. It seems that I have to do it myself. The yellow-haired man glared at Mohican and kicked him in the back. Then he stood up and squinted at Li Yundong, looking him up and down as if he wanted to see through his heart. Li Yundong also looked him up and down. He saw that the gangster's appearance and temperament were very similar to Huang Bo in Crazy Stone. For a moment he felt more and more funny in his heart. He smiled as if the people standing in front of him were not a group of gangsters, but a group of comedians. The yellow-haired man looked at Li Yundong for a long time and felt that Li Yundong was not afraid of him. Instead, he was like a cat seeing a mouse with a sense of ridicule. He knew in his heart that he must have met a master, but he also had the experience of kicking an iron plate. Seeing that he couldn't attack by force, he reached out to touch his back and sneered, "Are you really not going to give it to me?" Li Yundong had the experience of being shot by Zhao Yujin, so he was secretly vigilant, afraid that the man would pull out a gun from behind. He secretly ran his jinchi, waiting for the man to really pull out a gun. Then he would definitely strike first and kill him first. But after a while, Li Yundong saw the yellow-haired man suddenly pull out a black thing from behind him. He fixed his eyes on it and suddenly laughed. Su Chan, who was behind him, also giggled and said, "Don't you have anything else? Why are you all using bricks?" The yellow-haired man was also holding a brick in his hand, which was a little bigger than the one Mohican had used before. It seemed that since he was the big brother, the brick should also be a little bigger. Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "These monsters, if they go out with some controlled knives, they will definitely be locked up if they are caught. They don't need to bring these bricks because they are not controlled goods. Don't underestimate them. They are old gangsters." Li Yundong glanced at her and said with a smile, "You know so well. Have you also been in a gang before?" Ruan Hongling rolled her eyes at Li Yundong and said, "You are the one who has been in a gang before. I can understand these things at a glance. Do you still need to be in a gang?" The yellow-haired man saw the two of them talking and laughing happily, not taking him seriously at all. He was angry in his heart and shouted, "Hey, do you think I am invisible?" Li Yundong turned his face and pretended to be suddenly enlightened. He said, Sorry, I didn't notice and forgot about you. May I ask why you are here?" The yellow-haired man was so angry that he gritted his teeth. He smiled grimly and said, "You really won't give it to me?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "It seems that I'm not going to give it to you." The yellow-haired man pointed at Li Yundong and shouted, "I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to give it to me or not?" Li Yundong simply shook his head and said, "No." The yellow-haired man took a deep breath and said, "Well, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Li Yundong chuckled and looked at the yellow-haired man as if he was watching a monkey show. He wanted to see what the hell he was going to do. He saw the yellow-haired man take a deep breath, his eyes narrowed and his chi sank into his dantian. Then with a loud shout, he waved the brick in his hand and slapped it heavily on his face. With a loud bang, the yellow-haired man suddenly slapped himself so hard that his face was covered in blood. Li Yundong was stunned and his eyes widened. He thought to himself, F***ck, I've seen selfies, but I've never seen a selfie like this. Behind him, Su Chan and the others were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out. Su Chan said, "Is this guy crazy?" The yellow-haired man's face was covered in blood, but he pointed at Li Yundong fiercely and said, You don't go. If you have the guts, don't go. You're dead." After that, he threw the brick on the ground, turned around and pushed the door open. Then he stood at the door and howled loudly, shouting hysterically, I'm being beaten to death. Chinese people love to watch the fun." The yellow-haired man's howl immediately attracted a large group of people to watch, and many people pointed at him. Li Yundong winked at Ziyuan and the others and also walked out. After a while, two men in urban management uniforms squeezed through the crowd and shouted, "What happened?" As soon as the yellow-haired man saw the urban management officers, he immediately felt as if he had seen a relative. "Comrade Police, you came at the right time. These people..." The yellow-haired man turned around and pointed at Li Yundong. He gritted his teeth and said, "As soon as we entered the shop, this man hit me with a brick like crazy." After that, he turned his head again and said to the urban management officers with a sad face, "Comrade Police, you have to uphold justice for us." Li Yundong saw that the yellow-haired man's face changed so quickly, which was really admirable. It was a waste of his talent not to act in movies. With him around, how could Comrade Huangbo have a chance? After hearing this, the two urban management officers shouted at Li Yundong without saying a word, "Hey, you come with us." As they spoke, one of them took out handcuffs from his waist. Before Li Yundong could say anything, Ruan Hongling suddenly burst out laughing. She pointed at the two urban management officers with her hands on her hips and shouted, "Hey, you two fakes! Can't you tell the difference between the skin of an urban management officer and that of a police officer? How can an urban management officer have handcuffs? Only the police can use them. Do you understand?" The face of one of the urban management officers changed, and he glared at the man holding the handcuffs beside him. The man holding the handcuffs turned as red as a pig's liver. He put away the handcuffs resentfully and shouted at Ruan Hongling angrily, "You beat people in the street. Come with us." The four gangsters also began to make a racket. The yellow-haired man, whose face was covered in blood, looked like he was about to die in the next second. Some of the onlookers saw that Li Yundong was dressed in bright clothes and was followed by a large group of beautiful women, so they subconsciously thought that he was a rich second generation. Their hearts were filled with hatred for the rich. In addition, these gangsters and the urban management had provoked them, so they also began to make noise. For a moment the scene was chaotic and foul. Li Yundong remained calm and said to the two urban management officers, "Ask them which brick I used to hit him with." The urban management officer glanced at the yellow-haired man, who had been on the verge of death just now. At this time he suddenly had an idea. He pointed to the brick in the store and shouted, "He hit me with this brick. There is still my blood on it. If you don't believe me, you can go and test it." The urban management officer shouted, "Go and take out the brick. We want to have a blood test." Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "You guys are really good at acting." Sure enough, 800 urban management officers destroy Dongying and 3,000 urban management officers conquer Taiwan. It's really domineering. Su Chan also said angrily to them, "He obviously hurt himself. Why are you blaming us?" As soon as she opened her mouth, the Fox Zen school immediately became noisy. There were so many beautiful women among them. With this shout, it was really a lively scene. There were more and more onlookers around. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. It was really a sea of people. Li Yundong raised his hand and stopped Su Chan and the others from making a racket. He smiled at Su Chan and said, "Go and pick up the brick." Although Su Chan didn't understand, she still obediently answered and ran inside to pick up the brick. Li Yundong raised the brick high in front of everyone and said loudly, "Everyone look carefully. This is the weapon they said I hurt him with." Ruan Hongling was shocked when she saw that Li Yundong had actually admitted that he had hurt the yellow-haired man. "Hey, are you crazy? It's obvious that he hurt himself." Ziyuan also frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "Li Yundong, we cultivators shouldn't get involved in this kind of thing. It's very troublesome." Li Yundong smiled at them to show that he had a card up his sleeve. He said to the yellow-haired man, "Hey, look carefully. Is this the weapon I hurt you with?" Seeing that Li Yundong had actually admitted it, the yellow-haired man was overjoyed. Yes, it's this brick. Everyone look, there is my blood on it." He was so excited that he jumped up, but before he could finish speaking he realized that something was wrong. He quickly covered his wound and shouted, looking like he was dying. The 2 urban management officers shouted, "Since you have admitted it, the witness and the material evidence are all here. Come with us." Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "The urban management officers are so lenient. When did they start doing the work of the police?" One of the urban management officers glared at her and said, "If you say another word, I'll take you away too." Ruan Hongling had a bad temper. She also glared back and said, "Well, come and catch me." Li Yundong smiled and made a gesture to her, indicating that she should not speak. Then he raised the solid blue brick high in front of everyone and said, "Everyone look carefully. How could this brick hurt anyone?" After that he rubbed his hands on the brick. No one could see how he moved, but suddenly, the brick seemed to be made of flour and turned into powder. Li Yundong's actions caused an uproar in the crowd. Wang Lingfei, Zhou Ping and the others who had been watching from the sidelines suddenly gasped. Zhou Ping said in horror, "This person's jinqi is really strong and condensed. He actually crushed such a blue brick into powder without batting an eyelid. No wonder Shitty could fight with him with heavenly thunder, but he was unharmed. Good kung fu. How terrifying." Wang Lingfei's face was also full of shock. He couldn't say a word and there was fear in his eyes. Li Yundong had easily crushed the blue brick into powder. He clapped his hands, pointed at the yellow-haired man and the others and shouted, "It's obvious that these people are blackmailing us." The eyes of everyone present immediately fell on the yellow-haired man and the others. All of them looked unfriendly and ready to make trouble. Chapter 350. Go to WatchNet. The onlookers didn't know that Li Yundong had used his powerful Zhenqi to crush the blue brick into powder in an instant. They thought that the blue brick was really made of flour. Watch net. 7KOM. Of course, the four gangsters knew that the brick was the real deal. It was terrifyingly hard, especially the yellow-haired gangster who had just patted himself. He stared at Li Yundong with bulging eyes as if he had seen the devil. He thought to himself, "Oh my God, am I seeing a god? This was clearly a brick that was as hard as steel. Why did it seem to have become tofu dregs in his hands? Could it be that he had switched them just now? No, impossible, I saw it with my own eyes." While he was thinking, the crowd around him began to clamor. Compared with the rich second generation, they hated this kind of blackmailer even more. They shouted one by one, "These people want to blackmail us. Arrest them." The two city enforcement officers saw that the situation was not good. Their legs trembled and they immediately wanted to escape. Ruan Hongling had sharp eyes. She pointed and shouted, "Catch these two imposters." The power of the people was great. Immediately, there were warm-hearted people blocking their way. The two city enforcement officers, who had been acting all high and mighty just a moment ago, instantly turned into a puddle of mud. The crotch of the one who had taken out the handcuffs earlier was now wet. The other three hoodlums were also scared out of their wits. Their faces were ashen, their legs were trembling, and their teeth were chattering. They covered their heads with their hands and squatted on the ground, fearing that they would be beaten to a pulp by the agitated crowd. When the crowd saw them like this, they became more and more enthusiastic. Some people even shouted, "Beat them to death. Don't let these scumbags go." The yellow-haired man was frightened. He was the boss, so he immediately reacted. He jumped up and knelt down in front of Li Yundong, crying bitterly, "Boss, I had eyes but failed to recognize Mao Tai. I've offended you. Please do me a favor and just treat me as a fart. Let me go." Li Yundong snorted and said with a smile, "Didn't you say that I hit you?" The yellow-haired man quickly shook his head and said with a flattering smile, No, it's just a misunderstanding." As he spoke, he turned around and smiled at the crowd. "It's a misunderstanding. It's really a misunderstanding." After he finished speaking, he turned around and begged Su Chan and the others for mercy. "Beauties, please do me a favor and be merciful. You nobles like to be clean. It's not good to dirty your hands by hitting people like me. Beauties, grandaunts, I'll call you grandaunts, okay? If that's not possible, then I'll call you mom, right?" After the yellow-haired man said this, everyone burst into laughter. Ruan Hongling even blushed and stamped her feet, saying, "Bah, I'm still a virgin. I don't have a baby as old as you." Su Chan was kind by nature. When she saw the yellow-haired man say such extremely humble words, even the resentment in her heart dissipated. She pulled Li Yundong's hand and said softly, "Yundong, forget it. Let him go, okay?" Li Yundong glanced at Su Chan, smiled slightly and patted her hand, indicating that he had an idea. He turned his head and said to the yellow-haired man, "The wound on your face really wasn't caused by me?" Seeing that there was a turning point, the yellow-haired man hurriedly said, "No, absolutely not. Who said that the wound on my face was caused by you? Is there a wound on my face?" He turned his head and looked at his three companions. "Do you see a wound on my face?" The three gangsters were not fools, so they quickly shook their heads like a rattled drum. The yellow-haired man immediately turned to Li Yundong and said with a flattering smile, "Look, they all said that there was no wound on my face." Li Yundong pointed at the blood on his face and said with a smile, "Then what's with the blood on your face?" The yellow-haired man touched his face with his hand and said loudly in surprise, "Is this blood? No way, this is sweat, yes, sweat, ha ha ha, it's a face full of sweat." After that, he turned his head to look at his three companions. "Hey, is my face full of sweat?" The three gangsters had strange expressions on their faces, as if they wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. They could only force themselves to nod. However, the people around them all laughed wildly. Li Yundong also laughed and said, "Your face is full of blood and sweat? Do you think you're a Fergana horse?" As soon as Li Yundong finished speaking, the others laughed even harder. Su Chan even squatted on the ground with her hands covering her stomach. Ziyuan also couldn't help laughing. The yellow-haired man was embarrassed by everyone's laughter. He said with a flattering smile, Yes, I am a Fergana horse. Please be merciful and let me go. In the future I will serve you." Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, "Forget it. I don't have such luck. Let's go. Be careful in the future." When the yellow-haired man heard this, he was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "My lord, you are really generous. You will definitely be rich in the future." Li Yundong listened with a smile. He waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and go before I change my mind." The yellow-haired man didn't dare to stay any longer. He beckoned to his 3 companions and quickly got into the crowd. The remaining 2 urban management officers also rolled their eyes, lowered their heads and got into the crowd, disappearing without a trace. Seeing that everyone had run away, Ruan Hongling rushed up to Li Yundong and stamped her feet. "Why did you let them go? If we don't teach them a lesson, everyone will think that we are easy to bully in the future and come looking for trouble with us." Li Yundong said with a smile, "As soon as these people came in, I realized that they were deliberately looking for trouble. Although I have a lot of grudges, there are only a few people in the secular world who have grudges with me. If I don't let them go, how can I find out who the mastermind is? These people are just being used by others. Judging from their usual arrogant and haughty attitude, they will definitely go back to find trouble with the instigator after suffering such a big loss today. When that time comes, won't it be fine for them to just follow behind them?" Only then did Ruan Hongling's anger turn into joy. She gave Li Yundong a thumbs up and said, "You are really smart. You are full of evil tricks." Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "Hey, are you praising me or scolding me?" At this time the crowd saw that Li Yundong, as the owner of the matter, had calmed down. Naturally, there was no reason for the onlookers to surround them. Some people said, "Hey, it's all right. Let's go. The show is over." Some curious people saw that there were so many beautiful women in this shop, so they came forward to ask what kind of shop it was. Ruan Hongling took the opportunity to promote the brand of Desangxian. She had a red mouth and white teeth, a clear and melodious voice, and an extremely beautiful appearance. In a short while she had fooled a large group of people, but they were confused and thought to themselves, "This shop is going to open. I have to come and have a look. Even if I don't drink tea, it's good to see beautiful women." At this time, Li Yundong said to Su Chan and said, "Let's go and catch up with them and see who the mastermind behind these gangsters is." Su Chan responded and followed Li Yundong excitedly. The 2 of them were far behind the yellow-haired man and the others. The yellow-haired gangsters had no idea that they had not only kicked a hard iron plate, but also been trailed by others. The yellow-haired man didn't take long to come to an intersection. He met a man in a suit and 2 beautiful women. As soon as he saw the man, he rushed up aggressively and shouted loudly. His 3 men also surrounded the man. Li Yundong looked from a distance and was stunned. He whispered, "It's him?" Su Chan also looked and saw that the man was Zhao Yuzhen, who had sat in their seats in the mall before. Su Chan also asked curiously, "Does this guy have a grudge against us?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "He doesn't have a grudge against you, but he does have a grudge against me. Humph, he played dirty behind my back. Well, I'll pay him back later. I'll make him afraid when he sees me in the future." From a distance, the 2 of them saw the yellow-haired man and the others surrounding Zhao Yuzhen and roaring loudly, threatening and intimidating him. Li Yundong could hear them clearly from a distance. "F***CK, how dare you set me up? I've kicked an iron plate. Do you see the flowers on my face? If you don't pay for my medical expenses and mental damage today, I'll cut you into pieces today." Zhao Yuzhen was so scared that he was trembling like a sieve. The 2 beautiful women beside him were also scared out of their wits, and their bodies almost fell to the ground. Not long after, Zhao Yuzhen took out a wallet from his arms, took out a stack of money from it, and handed it over with trembling hands. "Here you are. It's all here." The yellow-haired man grabbed the money and his wallet, taking out the rest of the money. His 3 companions also searched Zhao Yogan's pockets, took off his gold ring and watch and put them in their pockets. Seeing that his 3 lackeys really couldn't find anything, the yellow-haired man sneered at Zhao Yuzhen and scolded, "F***CK, be smarter next time. There are some people I can't afford to offend, but I can still afford to offend people like you." After that he left with his 3 lackeys. Zhao Yuzhen waited until they were far away before he straightened up, his face cloudy. The 2 women next to him wanted to help him, but Zhao Yuzhen slapped them in the face and shouted, "F***CK, I was threatened just now but you didn't help me." The woman who had been slapped happened to be the pointy-faced beauty who had been slapped last time. She turned her face away and covered her face with one hand. The resentful look in her eyes was chilling, but when she turned her face away she was smiling apologetically. The other beauty said with a hollow smile, "Boss Zhao, weren't we afraid just now?" Zhao Yuzhen scolded, "Afraid? Why should I be afraid of you? Why should I pay for you?" The pointy-faced beauty who had been slapped whispered, "Boss Zhao, we're not bodyguards." Zhao Yuzhen was so angry that he raised his foot and wanted to kick her. The other beauty next to him quickly stopped him. "Hey Boss Zhao, calm down, calm down. Hurry up and call the police. We'll call the police. There are so many people here. It won't be good if they see you hit a woman. Zhao Yuzhen raised his hand and slapped her again. I hit a woman. What are you going to do? The woman covered her red face and didn't dare to make a sound. Zhao Yuzhen roared like a madman for a while. When he was a little tired, he cursed and left. The other two beauties looked at each other and slowly followed him. Seeing the three of them leave, Su Chan looked at Li Yundong and asked, Yundong, shouldn't we go up and teach this guy a lesson? This guy is so hateful. Li Yundong snorted and said with a sneer, I really wanted to teach him a lesson, but now it seems that there's no need. If I hit this kind of person, it will dirty my hands and feet. Don't worry, someone will help me deal with him. Su Chan was stunned, but she quickly reacted. You mean the two women beside him? Li Yundong laughed and said, Yes, didn't you see the look in that woman's eyes just now? I can feel the hatred and resentment in her eyes even from so far away. Just watch. People like Zhao Yuzhen will definitely get their retribution, and it will definitely be on these two women. Su Chan nodded hard. This kind of person is too hateful. Li Yundong patted the girl on the shoulder and said, Let's go back. Just as Li Yundong and Su Chan chased after them, Zhou Ping and the others saw that the crowd had dispersed, and Wang Lingfei had been shocked by Li Yundong's move. For a moment he didn't dare to act rashly. She sneered in her heart and felt a little disdainful of Wang Lingfei's stage fright. She said, Let's go. Come back another day? Wang Lingfei was eager to do so, so he snorted and said, I still have two powerful magical weapons to refine. When I'm done, I'll come back to make trouble for this guy. They turned around and were about to leave when they suddenly heard an elegant and quiet voice. Fellow Taoists of the Jingyi school, you've been watching here for a long time. What's the matter? Zhou Ping and the others were shocked and turned around vigilantly. They fixed their eyes on the source of the voice and saw a beautiful woman in a white dress standing in front of them. It was Zi Yuan. Chapter 351. Go to watch net. When Zhou Ping and the others saw Zi Yuan, they immediately reached into their arms and grabbed their powerful magical weapons. They glared at her fiercely, and their bodies were covered with zhenqi. Watch net. Wang Lingfei also looked at Zi Yuan, and his eyes shone brightly. He said slowly, Jinren Zi Yuan really deserves her reputation. She is indeed an immortal and I admire her. Zi Yuan glanced at him indifferently, smiled slightly and said, This fellow Taoist must be Wang Lingfei, who is known as Jinren Yuchuan? Wang Lingfei smiled and said, I wouldn't dare. I rarely go down the mountain. Has Jinren Zi Yuan heard of my name? Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, In the Jingyi school, it is rumored that there are only two disciples of the younger generation who can be considered masters. One is Zhang Tianhe, and the other is Wang Lingfei. Since perfected Yuchuan is so famous, how could I not know him? Wang Lingfei thought highly of himself. When he was praised by Zi Yuan, he suddenly felt a little complacent. He snorted and said, You flatter me. Jinren Zi Yuan is also a pillar of the Linggong sect. Why did you collude with the people of the Fox Zen school? Zhou Ping also sneered and said, Zi Yuan, you have to think it through. This is the last time I remind you not to get involved with the people of the Fox Zen school. Otherwise, our Jingyi school will regard you as traitors. At this time Ruan Hongling also came over. She sneered and retorted without showing any weakness, Do you think we are traitors? How arrogant. Who do you think you are? Is it the Taoist master of Jingyi school? As soon as Zhou Ping saw Ruan Hongling, her eyes lit up. She gritted her teeth and said, It's you again. Don't think that you can be proud just because you have a sharp tongue. Ruan Hongling interrupted, What about me? I, Ruan Hongling, have never relied on my eloquence to speak, but on reasoning. Every time I make you speechless, it's because you're pestering me endlessly. It's unreasonable. If you're right, do you think I can win against you even if I have 100 mouths? Zhou Ping was so angry that she said angrily, Why am I unreasonable? How is that reasonable? Don't tell me you're in the right because you're hanging out with this kind of evil people? This is preposterous. Ruan Hongling snorted. Evil? I used to think that the Fox Zen school was evil, but after getting along with them these days, I feel that they are no different from ordinary people. They are even much cuter than most people in this world. On the contrary, some so-called fellow disciples are aggressive and want to drive the Spirit Palace sect to a dead end. In my opinion, you guys are the real evil and crooked. His words were really like a javelin and a dagger. Zhou Ping was so angry that her face turned pale and her lips trembled. The expressions of Wang Lingfei and the other disciple of the Jingyi school also changed drastically. Hearing this, Ziyuan was also shocked. She shouted, "Hongling, don't talk nonsense." Ruan Hongling had been holding back her anger for a long time. She shouted at Ziyuan, "Sister Ziyuan, why are you still so polite to them? Wherever we retreat they chase after us. Do you think they're here to invite us back? Is there really a solution to this?" Ruan Hongling raised her eyebrows and shouted at Zhou Ping and the others, "Since you guys are so capable, if you have the guts to make a move here, I will consider that you are really overbearing. If you don't have the ability, get out of here. I can't bear to see bastards like you." Zhou Ping was extremely angry. She glared at her, and a ray of light shot out of her eyes like lightning. "Do you think I don't dare?" Wang Lingfei also scolded, "Who do you think you are? How dare you talk like this?" After that he stepped forward and grabbed Ruan Hongling's shoulder, wanting to teach her a lesson. But as soon as Wang Lingfei moved, Ziyuan shouted, "Stop." Ziyuan turned her wrist and put her 5 fingers on Wang Lingfei's wrist. Zhou Ping and the stout disciple next to her shouted at the same time, and the two of them attacked Ziyuan's vital parts. Zhou Ping's 5 fingers were like hooks, and her fingers were in the shape of an eagle's claw. Once someone was caught by her fingers, not only would their meridians be restricted, but their wrists might also be broken. The other stout disciple took a step forward, with one hand pulled back in front of his chest and his palm facing the sky, as if he was holding an invisible iron tower ready to attack. His other hand was clenched, a bit like a tiger's claw. As long as it touched the body, it could take away a large piece of flesh. But at a closer look, it was a bit like a crane's beak. When the 5 fingers gathered, a gentle peck could hit the vital acupoints of the human body and hurt the enemy invisibly. Ziyuan frowned. She knew that if she could save Ruan Hongling, she wouldn't be able to protect herself. If she could protect herself, she wouldn't be able to save Ruan Hongling. Just as she was in a dilemma, she suddenly heard a familiar voice coming from the side. "Are you bullying me with more people?" After that, she saw a left hand twisting in. This arm was like a fierce dragon crossing the river, overturning the rivers and seas. The big arm leaned against Zhou Ping's finger, and Zhou Ping suddenly felt a majestic and vigorous jinqi rush over like a tsunami. She was so shocked that she immediately withdrew. The stout disciple of the Jingyi school took a deep breath, and his whole body swelled up like a balloon. Instead of retreating, his hands went up to meet the attack. On the other side, Wang Lingfei saw a figure suddenly appear between them. This person's right hand made a lotus fist, and his index finger was raised, with the upper joint slightly bent like a hook. At the same time, this person shouted, "Bang!" It was the Buddha's handprint of eliminating obstacles. Wang Lingfei saw that the other party had arrived first. If he retreated, not only would he weaken his momentum but he might also be injured by the other party, so he simply threw a punch at him. This exchange was so fast that Ziyuan could only see a series of afterimages flashing by. Then she heard a few puff-puff sounds and Zhou Ping flew back. Wang Lingfei and the Mahamudra collided head-on, and his face suddenly turned blood red as if blood was about to drip out. He stood there motionlessly, not saying a word. The stout disciple of the Jingyi school did not say a word. His body flew backward and hit the wall on the street, causing the passers-by to cry out in alarm and look at them in unison. At this time, Ziyuan found that it was Li Yundong standing in front of her. The boy's back was like an iron tower, motionless and standing proudly, as if no matter how big the wind and waves in front of him were, they could not knock him down. Li Yundong stood tall among them, and there was a faint white steam rising from the top of his head. One of his hands was maintaining the shape of the Buddha's handprint of eliminating obstacles, while the other arm had a few holes. It was obvious that the stout disciple of the Jingyi school had only scratched Li Yundong's clothes before he had been sent flying. Ziyuan knew that Li Yundong's jinqi was extremely dense and condensed, and she had suddenly intervened, causing the 3 people of the Jingyi school to suffer a great loss. Wang Lingfei stood where he was, his face turning from red to white and then from white to red. After repeating this several times, he let out a long breath and looked at Li Yundong with surprise and doubt in his eyes. "Who are you? Who is your master?" Li Yundong snorted coldly. "It's none of your business." Wang Lingfei said in shock, "I see that you have the Jinqi Kung Fu of the Shenmen sect. Why are you going against our Jingyi school?" After Zhou Ping helped up the Shirdi who had been sent flying by Li Yundong, she didn't wait for Li Yundong to speak and shouted, "This is Li Yundong, who has abandoned himself to associate with the Fox Zen school and forced himself to stand out." Wang Lingfei was shocked again. He took a step back and looked Li Yundong up and down seriously. With a solemn expression he said, "Are you Li Yundong?" Li Yundong cupped his fists and said, "Yes, what can I do for you?" Wang Lingfei took a deep breath, narrowed his eyes and said, "My Shirdi Zhang Tianhe was defeated by you. I heard that you have practiced the heavenly Jindan technique. Is that true?" Li Yundong hadn't expected to encounter such a thing when he came back. When he heard the other party ask about the whereabouts of the heavenly Jindan technique, he was shocked and unhappy. He snorted and asked instead of answering, "What? Are you here to fight for him? Well, do you want to fight me one by one or together?" Wang Lingfei hadn't expected that Li Yundong would be even more arrogant than he was. He was so agitated by Li Yundong that he forgot to ask about the whereabouts of the heavenly Jindan technique. He snorted and said, "It's said that Jinrenli is unruly and unrestrained. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation." The corner of Li Yundong's mouth twitched and he sneered. "I've also heard that the Jingyi school is overbearing and aggressive. Seeing you today, it's really not as good as seeing you in person." Seeing that Li Yundong was also a sharp-tongued person, Wang Lingfei's expression changed and he shouted, "Li Yundong, don't be complacent. We, the Jingyi school, can crush a small fox Zen school to death." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of heaven, earth and my wife, but I'm not afraid of threats. Are you threatening me?" At this time, the disciples of the Fox Zen school also gathered around. Although there weren't many of them, they were much more than Zhou Ping and the other two. Moreover, they were all beautiful and they could attract countless eyes just by standing on the street. For a moment, the crowd surrounded them again. Zhou Ping looked around and whispered to Wang Lingfei, "Shi Xiang, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Let's go first. We will get revenge sooner or later." Wang Lingfei had seen Li Yundong's palms crush the blue bricks like flour. In the fight just now, he had also been knocked out of breath by Li Yundong's powerful Jinqi and couldn't speak. However, Li Yundong had spoken freely without any hindrance. Not to mention anything else, the difference in Jinqi cultivation was obvious. Wang Lingfei was well aware of this. He knew that if he fought with this person in front of him, if he didn't have a powerful magical weapon, he would most likely lose. He thought to himself, "My two powerful magical weapons will take another month to refine. Why should I fight with this person?" Wang Lingfei also wanted to leave, so he nodded. Zhou Ping looked at Li Yundong with a sneer and said, "Li Yundong, I know that your cultivation is good, but no matter how powerful you are, you can't be invincible in the world. Can you resist the siege of all the cultivation sects in the world?" Li Yundong said proudly, "I, Li Yundong, have never relied on my fists. I rely on my own righteousness and stability. As the saying goes, a righteous person is not afraid of a crooked shadow. I don't believe that all the cultivation sects in the world will use their power to avenge their personal grievances and be aggressive like you." Zhou Ping gritted her teeth and said, Okay. She then looked at Ziyuan and said, "Ziyuan, have you made up your mind to go against our Jingyi school? Do you want to be the great traitor of our Jingyi school in the past 1,000 years?" This accusation was really scary. Ziyuan's body trembled slightly, but she quickly said indifferently, "I still have the same words. I, Ziyuan, only exist for cultivation. I don't need others to tell me what to do or what to say. Whether I am a traitor or not, the cultivation world has its own justice. It can't be decided by one or two people's empty words. Even if the cultivation world thinks that I am a traitor now, I believe that it will naturally give me justice after 1,000 years." Ruan Hongling also said angrily, "Sister Ziyuan, what's there to say to her?" Zhou Ping laughed and said, "Mystical Silver Fox said the same thing at the beginning, but what about now? More than 1,000 years have passed. Isn't she still notorious? Ziyuan, let me tell you, what stinks is stinks. It will never become fragrant." As she said this, she glared at Li Yundong fiercely. Just like the Fox Zen school, evildoers will always be evildoers. They haven't changed for 1,000 years and they won't change in the future. Li Yundong was furious. He took a step forward and shouted, "Do you want to die?" Chapter 352. Go to WatchNet. This loud shout really shook the glass of the surrounding shops. Many onlookers on the street only felt a buzzing sound in their ears, as if someone had hit their eardrums with chopsticks. The pain made them unable to hear the rest of their words, and they could only cover their ears with their hands. Go to WatchNet. Zhou Ping and the others were also shocked by Li Yundong's shout, and the Jinqi in their bodies became chaotic. She couldn't help but feel a burst of fear in her heart. She looked at Li Yundong with hatred and shouted, "Let's go." At this time they were in a busy market, so she was not afraid of Li Yundong's sneak attack. After saying that, she turned around and left with her Shirdi. Before Wang Lingfei left, he looked at Li Yundong coldly and then at Ziyuan. Suddenly he sneered and said, "Jinren Ziyuan Jinren Li, don't be cowards at the Taoist assembly in a while." After that, he laughed and raised his head to leave. Ruan Hongling looked at their departing figures and spat fiercely. "What the hell? Using a chicken feather as a token of authority. Do you really think you're the leader of the Jingyi school?" Li Yundong's face was as dark as water. He turned his head and saw Ziyuan frowning slightly. Her eyes were confused as if she was thinking about something. Li Yundong asked, "Ziyuan, what is the Taoist assembly?" Ziyuan came to her senses. Her eyes narrowed, she thought for a moment and said, "It's not convenient to talk here. Let's go back and talk." Li Yundong looked around and saw that the pedestrian street was surrounded by layers of people. Some policemen and urban management officers had come out to maintain order. He nodded and said, "Well, let's go back and talk." The group of people had come out happily, but in the end they went back angrily. As soon as they entered the house, everyone started cursing. Ruan Hongling was full of anger, but so were the people of the Fox Zen school. The little foxes felt that they had never done a bad thing in their lives. Why did these people just not allow them to exist in the world? Some people wore human skin, but they did things that were worse than beasts. In the end, they shouted and killed strange races like them, saying that they were evildoers who couldn't exist in this world, or else it would be treason and heresy. What kind of logic was that? Li Yundong saw them cursing together, but he didn't stop them. He just nodded to Ziyuan. Ziyuan understood, and the two of them went to a room. Li Yundong said, "Ziyuan, what's going on with the Taoist assembly? I heard what that person said just now. It seems like we are going too. Why can't I go?" Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "It's a long story." Li Yundong chuckled. "It's okay. Take your time. Do you want a cup of tea?" Ziyuan smiled slightly. During the northern and southern dynasties of the Jin dynasty, both Buddhism and Taoism flourished at the same time. In particular, all the scholars of the Jin dynasty studied Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Because if one of these three schools of learning was not good enough, they would not be able to get a good grade in the evaluation, and thus would not be able to get the opportunity to become an official. Throughout the history of China, Buddhism and Taoism had never been as prosperous and powerful at the same time as they were during that period. During the period of the northern and southern dynasties, Emperor Liang founded the first grand gathering of Buddhists. The Annals of Emperor Liang states that Emperor Liang came to Tongtai Temple and set up an open meeting. In the Tang dynasty, Xuanzang came back from the west to fetch scriptures. He also recorded in the records of the western regions of the Tang dynasty that an open meeting would be held in ancient India every 5 years. Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What is an open meeting?" Ziyuan explained, "The open meeting refers to a kind of big meeting held by Buddhism to build up good karma. It is a meeting where everyone is treated equally, regardless of whether they are noble or lowly, monks or laymen, wise or foolish, good or evil." Li Yundong asked again, "What does that have to do with the Taoist assembly?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "As I said just now, during the period of the northern and southern dynasties of the Jin dynasty, Buddhism and Taoism flourished at the same time. But in the Tang dynasty, especially when Emperor Taizong respected Buddhism, he held an open meeting every 5 years. The power of Buddhism often gathered, so Taoism was naturally excluded and declined. But at that time the Taoist sects were unwilling to retreat to the second line. They saw that Buddhism held an open meeting every 5 years, so the great Taoist Jinren Luo Gongyuan took the initiative to contact the great Taoist masters at that time, Zhanggua and Yi Fashion, and began to hold the quadrennial Taoist assembly. Li Yundong listened attentively. "And then?" Ziyuan said, "Later, after the Taoist assembly was held several times, it gradually became famous and reached the ears of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. Emperor Xuanzong of Tang was curious, so he summoned Luo Gongyuan and asked him to fight with Vajra Sanzang in front of the main hall of the imperial court. In the end, Luo Gongyuan won. From then on, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang changed his faith and began to worship Taoism. He asked Luo Gongyuan for advice on Taoist magic. Li Yundong understood a little and said, "I understand. From then on, there was a feud between Buddhism and Taoism?" Ziyuan nodded and said, "Yes, the Taoist assembly became famous from then on. All the Taoist sects were proud to be able to participate in the Taoist assembly. Those who can participate in the Taoist assembly are all top-notch sects in the cultivation world. Even if you lose to others, others will still look up to you. But if you can't participate, others won't even look at you in the eye." Li Yundong sneered and said, "Why should I care what they think of me? Ziyuan shook her head and advised, Li Yundong, you can't say that. Although we often call ourselves Taoists, in fact we are Taoists. Taoism pays attention to inaction and non-competition, while Taoism pays attention to the struggle between man and heaven. The process of a person's cultivation is the process of constantly fighting against himself and heaven. Therefore, our Taoist sect seems to be peaceful, but in fact, it is the most fierce and heaven-defying sect. Now that you have taken over the Fox Zen school, I believe you can also feel it. If you don't fight, you will starve to death in less than a month. If you want to open a tea shop, you will naturally have competitors. In the face of your opponents, how can you not fight? If you don't fight, you will have no money. If you don't have money, you will starve. If you starve, you won't be able to cultivate. If you can't cultivate, your sect will weaken and you will be bullied. Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed and said, Yes, how can I cultivate if I have to endure this kind of humiliation all day long? Ziyuan continued, there is also an advantage to participating in this kind of Taoist assembly. That is, it can let all the cultivation sects in the world know you and know your prestige so they don't dare to offend you again. And most importantly, the organizer of each Taoist assembly will take out a magical item as a prize to attract experts from all sects to participate in the assembly. Speaking of this, Ziyuan suddenly asked Li Yundong, by the way, guess who will be in charge of this Taoist assembly? Li Yundong asked curiously, isn't it the Jingyi school? Ziyuan shook her head and said, no, the Taoist assembly has evolved into a meeting for various sects to show their strength and attract followers. The Jingyi school is already strong enough, so they don't need to use this kind of meeting to prove their strength. Li Yundong pondered and said, which sect could it be? Ziyuan's eyes flickered and she said meaningfully, it's the Gizao sect of external alchemy. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Gizao sect? The Gizao sect that refined Renyuan Jindan? Ziyuan nodded and said, yes. Do you remember that we once said that there was a mastermind in the cultivation world planning a conspiracy? Li Yundong's expression was solemn. Yes, especially since the bodies of the two golden snakes were stolen and Zhang Sunhong's mysterious death. I vaguely feel that there seems to be some connection between these things. Ziyuan said, I think so too. Just now, when Wang Lingfei mentioned the Taoist assembly, I suddenly remembered that the dead golden snake had mentioned that the immortal pen and the medicine king tripod were about to appear. I couldn't help but think, the Gizao sect has always been low-key. Why did they take the initiative to host the Taoist assembly this time? And why did Wan Jinyuan, the master of the Gizao sect, announce in such a high profile that he had refined Renyuan Jindan and then caused the Jindan to be stolen? Li Yundong's expression turned cold. Do you suspect that this has something to do with the Gizao sect? Ziyuan nodded and said, yes, I even suspect that the magical item of this Taoist assembly is either the immortal pen or the medicine king tripod. Li Yundong said, I don't know what the immortal pen does, but you said before that the medicine king tripod is a magical item used to refine the Yuan Jindan, right? Since the Gizao sect is an external alchemy sect, how could they be willing to give it to others? Ziyuan sneered and said, so, if the magical item taken out by the Gizao sect is the medicine king tripod, there must be a shocking conspiracy behind it. They even dared to give away the magical item used to refine the Yuan Jindan. This is equivalent to asking for the lifeblood of the external alchemy sect. Since they are so willing to give it away, they must be asking for something big. As she said this, she looked at Li Yundong with bright eyes and said, moreover, since ancient times, the refinement of Renyuan Jindan has never been limited to one. Li Yundong was shocked. He widened his eyes and looked at Ziyuan. You mean, there are other Renyuan Jindan in the world? Li Yundong had never seen the magical power of the immortal pen and the medicine king tripod, so he didn't have too many feelings or greed for them. However, Li Yundong had a deep feeling about Renyuan Jindan. If he didn't have Renyuan Jindan, he would still be an ordinary otaku at home. How could he be like this? Li Yundong thought to himself, although my cultivation has reached a very high level and I don't need the help of Renyuan Jindan, Su Chan and Zhou Qi need it. If they can also take a Renyuan Jindan, their cultivation will definitely advance by leaps and bounds in the future. In particular, the Renyuan Jindan he had taken had originally belonged to Su Chan. He had mistakenly taken her Jindan, which had caused her cultivation to stagnate. This had always made Li Yundong feel guilty. If he could get another Renyuan Jindan, he would be able to compensate the little girl. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly thought about it and couldn't help shaking his head. No, even if several Renyuan Jindan were refined at the same time, the person who obtained the Jindan would have taken it himself long ago. How could he have kept it until now? Seeing that he was tempted, Ziyuan knew what he was thinking in the blink of an eye. She said, although the Rinyuan Jindan may have been taken by someone, since the Rinyuan Jindan has appeared, the Medicine King tripod must have also appeared. We just don't know its whereabouts. However, according to the current situation, it is very likely to be in the hands of Wang Jinyuan, the leader of the Gizao sect. Since the Medicine King tripod is still in the world, have you ever thought that if you get it, you can refine the elixir of life by yourself in the future? Li Yundong was shocked. Refine it by myself? Chapter 353. Go to watch net. When Li Yundong heard what Ziyuan said, he was extremely surprised. In his eyes, Ziyuan had always been an elegant and modest fairy who stood aloof from worldly affairs. But suddenly she said such a thing which was simply encouraging him to snatch the Medicine King tripod, an extremely hot powerful magical weapon. Whether he could snatch it or not was another matter, but even if he did, he would definitely become enemies with all the outer sects in the world. Li Yundong looked at Ziyuan in surprise and said, "Didn't you say that you shouldn't let me have too deep of a grudge so that I wouldn't be able to do anything in the future?" Ziyuan's expression was surprisingly serious. She said, "Extraordinary times call for extraordinary things. I vaguely feel that something big is going to happen in the cultivation world. Under such great changes, if our cultivation is not strong enough, it is very likely that our bodies and souls will be destroyed." Ziyuan fixed her eyes on Li Yundong. She sighed softly and said, "Since the Battle of Mount Tianlong, I have seen that you have been busy with worldly affairs every day and have had no time to cultivate. Although your cultivation is still strong, you and I both know that your cultivation quotient has hardly improved. Otherwise, with your strength, you should have reached the advanced realm of the sixth heaven long ago and been able to cultivate your yin spirit into yang spirit." Ever since Li Yundong had become famous after the Battle of Mount Tianlong and defeated Ziyuan, Ziyuan had never given him any guidance in cultivation. At this time, Li Yundong suddenly looked embarrassed when he heard Ziyuan's words. "Go to watch net." Ziyuan continued, "I know that as the leader of a sect, you have to worry about the livelihood of so many people. It's difficult for you to cultivate if you are trapped in the secular world, so I suggest that you find another way. Otherwise, if you continue to cultivate at your current speed, you won't be able to reach the Yuanying phase in 100 years. These words aroused the pride in Li Yundong's heart. He thought to himself, "You have reached the Yuanying phase at the age of 20. Can't I reach the Yuanying phase at the age of 120? How dare you? There should be a limit to looking down on others. Tonight I will cultivate to the Yuanying phase for you to see." Li Yundong had been busy making a living these days, so he had indeed lost the drive he had when he was going through the heavenly tribulation. At this time he had been provoked by Ziyuan and made up his mind. His temperament and momentum had changed. Li Yundong didn't intend to say any heroic words to her. He just wanted to go back to his room and start cultivating. He wanted to prove it to her with his actions. Ziyuan was smart and naturally noticed the change in Li Yundong. She laughed in her heart, but her face didn't change. She still said, "I've already said everything. You can decide whether to go to the Taoist assembly or not. You can also decide whether to snatch the Medicine King tripod or not. I'll go back to my room first." Li Yundong watched her walk out of the door and thought for a while in the room alone. Not long after, Zhou Qin came back with the business license that had been approved. Li Yundong called her into the room and asked her a few questions about the license. Then he asked her to tell Su Chan and the others not to disturb him later. He wanted to meditate and cultivate. After Zhou Qin left, Li Yundong sat cross-legged on the bed. Not long after, the Jinqi in his body slowly flowed out of his 2 kidneys, like a warm current flowing through his whole body. After a while, he entered a deep meditative state and transformed into his original god spirit in his spirit space. Li Yunyang controlled his 3-headed and 6-armed god to go up to the sky and down to the ground in his spirit space. He could make it become whatever he wanted. He had really reached the great freedom realm of God manifestation and changing at will. But after Li Yundong operated like this for a while, he suddenly thought, "Why can't I change my yin spirit into the shape of 3 heads and 6 arms?" Thinking of this, Li Yundong quickly condensed his Jinqi into the Niden of the lower dantian in his lower abdomen. It didn't take long for his yin spirit to jump out. But after jumping out, Li Yundong looked at himself and found that there was no change at all. Not only did his yin spirit not grow stronger, but there were faint signs of regression. Li Yundong's heart trembled. He tried to use his mind to control the appearance of his yin spirit, but after trying for a while he found that his yin spirit had not changed at all. For a moment, Li Yundong couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Why can the God spirit of my spirit space change at will, but my Yin spirit can't change at will? Li Yundong thought about the various Buddhist and Taoist classics he had read one by one. He suddenly remembered the poem of the 8th phase of the heavenly Jindan technique he had read. It had once said, "The 8th phase of the heavenly Jindan technique is in the lower regions, and the Zhou Xing embryonic breath nurtures the baby. Sometimes the fire burns the elixir cave and goes deep into the cold spring to play with the red turtle." Thinking of this, Li Yundong suddenly had an idea. He thought to himself, when I practiced the heavenly Jindan technique before, I woke up naturally when I reached the 8th phase. I didn't completely finish the 8th phase. Why don't I try to completely finish the 8th phase today? Thinking of this, Li Yundong took back his Yin spirit. He thought again, before, when my Yin spirit left my body, it was the Jinqi of the 5 internal organs that drove my Yin spirit out of my body. That is to say, my Yin spirit qi came from my heart, liver, spleen, lungs and kidneys. In fact, this is not in line with the key of the heavenly Jindan technique. Because the heavenly Jindan technique starts with cultivating qi of courage. Through cultivating qi of courage, the kidneys are stimulated, and then the yin and yang qi of the 2 kidneys are combined to draw the heart fire of the heart. Finally, the heart fire and kidney water intersect and merge into one, forming a nidin. Li Yundong thought, why don't I just try to use the power of heart fire and kidney water to drive my jinqi? At this time, his internal organs had been cultivated to an extremely powerful level. Not only could he control the beating of his heart, but he could also control the changes of his 6 internal organs at will. He urged the gallbladder in his body to secrete a large amount of qi of courage. The qi of courage was blue, and his face also turned blue. Then Li Yundong felt that the qi of his 2 kidneys was stimulated by the qi of courage and became restless, slowly swimming out of his 2 kidneys. The 5 viscera and 6 bowels of the human body were all connected together. If one of them moved, the other would follow suit. This was easier said than done, but it was harder than ascending to the heavens. It was impossible to do without great willpower and wisdom. Before, Li Yundong had been entangled with worldly affairs and his heart had been restless. Naturally, he couldn't cultivate to this step. However, at this time he was provoked by Ziyuan and immediately calmed down. He easily reached this step. Li Yundong only felt that there was a light qi slowly rising in his chest. When it rose to the position of his heart in the middle dantian, it slowly became hot, like a ball of flame, while another turbid qi slowly sank like a vast ocean. Li Yundong knew that this was the sign of heaven fire and earth water. Then the qi of Li Yundong's middle dantian became hotter and hotter. This qi flowed from top to bottom and slowly flowed to the right kidney. Li Yundong knew that the right kidney belonged to yang, while the left kidney belonged to yin. As soon as his right kidney merged with the heaven fire, it immediately turned into a burning flame, as if it was burning the cave of alchemy. Then, Li Yundong tried to guide the blazing qi of his right kidney slowly to his left kidney, doing the combination of yin and yang. At this time, the qi of Li Yundong's right kidney slowly came out, like a huge black turtle slowly poking out its head, crawling towards Li Yundong's left kidney little by little. In sharp contrast to Li Yundong's right kidney, his left kidney was cold like a big ice house or a big cold pool. As soon as the blazing yang qi was injected into it, the qi suddenly rolled and yin and yang intersected. This was, sometimes the fire burns the elixir cave and goes deep into the cold spring to play with the red turtle. Then the yin and yang qi of Li Yundong's 2 kidneys merged into one and rushed straight to the heart of his middle dantian. Suddenly the earth water and the heaven fire merged into one. Water and fire intersected, and heaven and earth were in harmony. Li Yundong felt as if an atomic bomb had exploded in his body. As soon as the qi of his heart and kidney intersected, it caused a violent nuclear fission. His spirit space exploded in an instant, and Li Yundong suddenly found that the appearance of his god in his spirit space had changed again. In the past, although he had 3 heads and 6 arms, his appearance and skin were still fair. If not for the abnormality of 3 heads and 6 arms, he could still be regarded as a normal person. But now, his skin was really as dark as iron, and his nostrils were constantly spewing out 2 different colors of air. The air coming out of his left nostril was a thick black air, which was the qi of his kidney, and the air coming out of his right nostril was a bright red air, which was the qi of his heart. These 2 qis were condensed and did not dissipate. They lingered around his god, like a red and black cassock draped over his body, or like 2 auspicious clouds holding his dharmakaya. Li Yundong was overjoyed. He knew that the final performance of the 8th turn of the heavenly Jindan technique was to spit out red and black qi from his nose. He had already cultivated to the highest realm of the 8th turn of the fire creation technique. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He mobilized the Jinqi that was born from the Qi of courage, and then soaked his Niden in the kidney water. Then he mobilized the Jinqi to draw out his Yin spirit. At this time, Li Yundong only felt that his body was light, and then a person jumped out of his body. At a glance, he saw his body sitting cross-legged on the bed, while he was standing on the ground. Li Yundong found that at this time, not only had his body not grown bigger, but it had become smaller. Especially his arms, which were so small that they were like those of a newborn baby. Li Yundong was stunned. He tried to use this hand to pick up something, and as expected he easily picked it up. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He knew that he had finally cultivated to the Yuanying phase and refined his own Yang spirit. Once a cultivator cultivated the Yang spirit, he would be free from the 5 wheels of life and death, no longer be bound by the shackles of birth, old age, illness and death, and could be called a Zhenren. Before Li Yundong could stop after his success, he suddenly heard a soft knock on the door. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Relying on his small Yuanying body, he found a place to hide. He thought to himself, it's either Su Chan or Zhou Qin. I'll scare them. Li Yundong was secretly proud of himself, but he didn't expect that after the person pushed the door open, he would be stunned when he took a closer look. He saw that the person at the door was holding a plate with a soup bowl on it. She had a graceful figure, a romantic aura, and a beautiful appearance. It was Chao Yi, who had a high prestige in the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong asked curiously, "What is she doing here? Didn't I tell them not to disturb me? It's possible that Su Chan and Zhou Qin came to disturb me because of my love. But I don't think they will disturb my cultivation." While he was hesitating, he saw Chao Yi's eyes flickering at the door. She hesitated for a moment, as if she was hesitating whether to enter the door or not. But when her eyes narrowed and she made up her mind to enter, Su Chan suddenly asked curiously behind her, "Six Sherbua, what are you doing? Didn't Yundong say that no one should disturb him?" Chao Yi was shocked and came to her senses. She turned around and said to Su Chan with a smile, "Oh, it's Chaner. I made some soup for Leader and was wondering if I should bring it in for him." Su Chan rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Six Sherbua, let me do it." Chao Yi smiled and said, "Okay." As she said this, she put the plate in Su Chan's hand. Without looking at Su Chan and Li Yundong, she hurried away. Along the way she walked in a hurry and bumped into someone at the corner of the stairs. The two of them screamed at the same time. Chao Yi took a closer look and saw that the person she had bumped into was Zhuang Yiting. Zhuang Yiting rubbed her forehead and complained, "Shimmy, are you in a hurry to be reincarnated?" Chao Yi smiled awkwardly, apologized and then left in a hurry. Su Chan, who was on the stairs, looked at the two of them and thought to herself, "It's strange. With the skills of the two Sherbas, there's no reason for them to bump into each other. Why are they acting so strange today?" The little girl was simple-minded and didn't think too much about it. She smiled and entered the door with the plate. Because she saw that Li Yundong was controlling his qi, she walked quietly as if she were a thief. When she put the soup plate down, she squatted by the bed, holding her head in her hands, and looked at Li Yundong fixedly, her eyes full of love and infatuation. Li Yundong hid in the corner and saw the little girl looking at his body in a daze, not saying a word. It was as if she would accompany him like this no matter how long he sat like this. His heart warmed and he wanted to tease her, so he quietly came behind her and coughed. This cough didn't matter, but Su Chan was so scared that all the hair on her body stood on end. Su Chan thought to herself, Yundong is meditating and cultivating qi. Who would be hiding in his room? Su Chan didn't say a word. Instead, she turned her hand around and slapped him viciously. Chapter 354. Go to watch net. Su Chan's slap startled him. He hadn't expected that Su Chan would slap him. Watch net. 7 km. Su Chan had always been known for her speed. Her palm was as fast as lightning, but Li Yundong was in the body of a child at the moment. The palm narrowly brushed past his head and dodged Su Chan's attack. Seeing that Su Chan was about to slap him again, Li Yundong immediately jumped to the side and shouted, "Hey, do you want to kill your husband?" Only then did Su Chan turn around. She looked around and saw a naked child standing not far from her. The child was only about 2 years old, and his skin was smooth, glowing faintly. Su Chan couldn't react for a moment. She widened her eyes and asked curiously, "Little brother, who are you?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Silly girl, it's me, your daddy." Only then did Su Chan come to her senses. She looked surprised and said, Yundong, have you cultivated the yang spirit body? The little girl jumped up to Li Yundong happily and squatted down to look at him. Then, she curiously stretched out her hand to pinch the arm of Li Yundong's yang god body. She looked back at Li Yundong's real body sitting on the bed and giggled. It's so strange. There are two Li Yundongs. Actually, I'm Li Yundong's younger brother. Li Yundong blinked at Su Chan and said, I'm Li Yundong's brother. Su Chan giggled and said, Yes, yes, you are a little brother. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and flicked Li Yundong's lower body. She giggled and said, It's indeed a little brother. Li Yundong took a deep breath and said angrily, B****, how dare you call me a little brother? Li Yundong threw himself into Su Chan's arms, scratching and biting. I want to eat Big Granny. Su Chan giggled and put her hands in front of her. She said coquettishly, My grandma is only for Yundong to eat. You're Yundong's little brother, so I won't let you eat it. Li Yundong said angrily, I'm not a little brother. After that he said, Look big. As soon as Li Yundong's voice fell, his body suddenly grew larger, from a 2 or 3-year-old child to a 4 or 5-year-old child. Su Chan's eyes widened in shock. How did your yang spirit grow so fast? What do you think? I've grown a lot, haven't I? Su Chan's cheeks were flushed and she covered her burning face with her palms. Her fingers were wide open, revealing a pair of sly and quick-witted eyes. She giggled and said, It's only a little bigger. Li Yundong was displeased. He secretly mobilized his Jinchi and said, Increase, increase. In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong's yang spirit body grew a little bigger. At this time he looked like a 15 or 16-year-old boy. From his face one could vaguely see his appearance. Li Yundong said proudly, How is it? It's really big this time, isn't it? Su Chan giggled. Yes, yes, big master. Hurry up and put on your clothes. I'm so embarrassed. You're so shameless. Li Yundong chuckled. With a thought, his naked yang spirit body put on his clothes again in the blink of an eye, looking no different from a normal person. Only then did Su Chan put down her hand that was covering her face. She giggled and said, That was close. I almost saw it just now. Li Yundong scolded with a smile, Bah, the gap between your fingers is even bigger than the window. How dare you say that? Su Chan said angrily, No, you're talking nonsense. Li Yundong's yang spirit body flickered and flashed into his real body. He woke up from his meditation and said with a smirk, You just said that your grandma is only for Yundong to eat and not for Yundong's little brother, right? Is that also nonsense? Su Chan giggled and fell into Li Yundong's arms, her head going straight into his arms. She had a purine body, and Li Yundong had cultivated the yang spirit so his pure yang qi was incredibly strong. Naturally, it attracted the supreme yin qi in Su Chan's body. When the pure yang qi and the supreme yin qi in the human body moved, people would be aroused. Su Chan loved Li Yundong very much and was willing to give him anything. At this time her body suddenly turned into a pool of spring water, and her hands unconsciously reached down to Li Yundong's lower body to cultivate the 5 dragons embracing pillar magic kung fu. Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's eyes were like silk, and the breath coming out of her nose was full of decadence. He knew that the little girl was about to move, so he moved closer to her, bit her ear and said with a smile, What's wrong? Aren't you afraid of being taken by me today? When people's desires were intertwined, it was often easy to lose their minds. Su Chan looked up at Li Yundong, her eyes blurred with love, as if she wanted to rub herself into Li Yundong's body and never be separated again. She said in a sweet voice, I've refused you many times. I feel sorry for always rejecting my master. Li Yundong chuckled. He gently raised the little girl's chin with his hand and said with a smile, You're afraid that I won't be able to control myself after seeing so many beautiful women around me, aren't you? Su Chan blushed and buried her head in Li Yundong's arms, like a little girl whose thoughts had been seen through. She looked up at Li Yundong stealthily, then lowered her eyes in panic. Her long eyelashes kept trembling. Su Chan murmured, Did I make it so obvious? Seeing her like this, Li Yundong loved her to the extreme. He laughed and held her in his arms, then lowered his head to kiss the little girl's lips. Su Chan closed her eyes, looking as if she was at his mercy. Her charming appearance would make even a saint burn with fire and lose control. However, Li Yundong just kissed her lips, gently scratched her nose and said with a smile, Don't think about it, silly girl. If you give me your virginity now, you will never be able to cultivate to the 6-tailed fox spirit realm in this life. Su Chan's pretty face turned red and she murmured, I'm just afraid that you'll feel uncomfortable. Li Yundong lovingly held her in his arms and gently rubbed his forehead against the tip of Su Chan's nose. He said, "You're afraid that I'll feel uncomfortable, so you'd rather give up your cultivation. Am I so selfish that I'll ruin your lifelong cultivation for my momentary pleasure?" When Su Chan heard this, she immediately raised her head. Her eyes were wide open and filled with tears. The little girl's heart was in a mess. She only felt that there was such a man in this world who loved her, spoiled her, and cared for her. No matter what happened, he would always think of her. She really hadn't lived in vain once in this life. Su Chan's tears fell, and for a moment she cried like a pear blossom in the rain. Seeing that she was crying, Li Yundong quickly wiped her tears with both hands. "Oh, why are you crying? Alas, are women really made of water? I didn't make you unhappy, did I? Hey, I just don't want to do that with you, right? Why are you crying like this? Hey, no, you're not crying with joy because you know that you don't have to do that with me, are you?" Su Chan burst into laughter. She gently punched Li Yundong with her fist, wiped away her tears and said, "No, I remembered the 2 golden snakes who died last time." As she spoke, she raised her head with tears in her eyes and said, "I remembered what the golden snake said before it died last time. I felt very emotional and couldn't help crying for a while." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Silly girl, what's there to cry about?" Su Chan shook her head and choked with sobs. At that time the golden snake said, "I hope I won't be a demon in my next life." When I heard that, I thought to myself, how good would it be if I were a pure human being? Sister Ziyuan and Sister Zhou Qin are all pure human beings. No matter where they go, they won't cause any criticism. However, I am a fox demon. Wherever I go, people will say that I have abandoned myself and become a lowly person. But not only did you not despise me, but you also thought about me. I feel so happy. I don't know what kind of blessing I had in my last life to be able to be with you." Li Yundong's eyes became softer and softer. He put his arms around the girl's waist and said softly, "Silly girl, do we still need to say these things between us? I like you not because you are a fox demon or a pure human, but because of your kindness, because of your beauty, because of your innocence, because of your unwavering love, because of your unwavering loyalty to me from the very beginning. Don't think too much about it. Didn't I say last time that if we love each other for a long time, we won't have to make a bed? There will be a long time in the future. Are you afraid that you won't have time to have fun with me?" At first, Su Chan's eyes became more and more charming as she listened. Especially at the end, she burst into laughter. It was really like 100 flowers blooming at the same time, and it was amazing. Li Yundong patted the girl's head with a smile and said, "If you really want to have fun with me, hurry up and cultivate. When you reach my level, we can do it." Su Chan giggled. She suddenly seemed to think of something, and a pair of clever eyes rolled around in her eye sockets. As soon as Li Yundong saw her like this, he laughed and said, "What did you think of? Tell me quickly." Su Chan looked at Li Yundong shyly and timidly and said softly, "In fact, we have a way to cultivate faster." Hearing this, Li Yundong smiled and said, "What way?" Su Chan said shyly, "There are actually only 3 ways for us demons to cultivate. One is to absorb the lingqi of heaven and earth when the moon is full, in order to refine the Niden and then transform into a human form." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Is it easy to seduce men in human form?" Su Chan said angrily, "You're so annoying. Man is the spirit of all living things. Among all living things, only human beings can cultivate directly. If other living things want to cultivate, they must first transform into a human body before they can cultivate." Hearing this, Li Yundong also sighed and said, "Yes, I really understand this sentence today. Today I cultivated the heavenly Jindan technique to the 8th phase, and suddenly the yin spirit became the yang spirit. My cultivation has improved a lot. In fact, I just led the kidney chi to my heart and the heart fire, and then led the kidney chi on the right side to the left side. But many demons and stone monsters don't even have internal organs. How can they cultivate?" Su Chan also sighed faintly and said, "Yes, in the way of cultivation it can be said that men can get twice the result with half the effort, while women can get half the result with twice the effort. However, we female demons have to spend 100 times the effort to cultivate. Because of this, some female demons can't bear the hardships and loneliness of cultivation, so they came up with a way to seize the essence of yang to strengthen their own yuan. This kind of cultivation method is extremely fast, but it's easy to cause public anger and divine punishment at the expense of others." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "There are good and bad people, and there are naturally good and evil demons. We can't generalize them. But the cultivation method you just mentioned, is it to seize the essence of yang? Aren't you afraid that I will take you instead?" Su Chan shook her head with a blushing face and said, No, 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 it's not what you think. I used Yin Qi to explore your body and take out a little Yang Qi for my own use. This way, I won't hurt your foundation. When I first met you, I was injured by Ruan Hongling and Sister Ziyuan. At that time, I saw you sleeping next to me and you were a virgin, so I secretly took out a little of your Yuan Yinch. Su Chan looked at Li Yundong timidly and said, I haven't told you about this. You won't blame me, will you? Li Yundong laughed and said, Well, you secretly took me once. After that, Li Yundong fell on the bed on his back and shouted, Hero, come and pick me up. Su Chan giggled and said with a smile, You're so annoying. It's not what you think. Li Yundong smiled wickedly and said, Then what is it? Su Chan pointed at her red lips and said with a smile, It's sucking with my mouth. Li Yundong looked enlightened and exclaimed, It turns out that you use your cherry mouth to suck. Su Chan didn't understand. She nodded and said, Yes, the mouth is one of the 7 apertures. It can not only release qi but also inhale, so As she spoke, she saw that Li Yundong had already fallen on the bed laughing. Su Chan was stunned, but she quickly reacted. Her pretty face turned red as if blood was about to drip out. She rushed over with shame and anger and shouted, Bad guy, what are you thinking about? Li Yundong laughed and hugged the little girl on the bed. Well, I might have something to do next week, so I'll bring up next week's explosion to this week. Judging from the current situation, the 7th on the flower list should be able to sit still. For the time being, I'll still do it every day from midnight to Monday. I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused my readers. She said softly, You're right, but in fact, dual cultivation is a very complicated and dangerous thing. When men and women are having sex, they often can't control their emotions. How can they control their own aura calmly? Once they can't control their own aura, their spirit will be unstable, causing the aura of the weak to flow to the strong, causing one side to suffer a great loss and the other side to benefit greatly. Li Yundong also nodded and said, You're right. I remember that Ziyuan once said that cultivation is extremely scientific. It can never create energy out of thin air. Even cultivation has to abide by the law of conservation of energy. It's almost impossible for 2 people to increase their strength at the same time after dual cultivation. This principle is the same as playing mahjong. Whether it's 2 people playing mahjong together or 4 people playing mahjong together, it's impossible for 2 parties to win at the same time, or 4 parties to win at the same time. One party must lose and one party must pay. Su Chan looked at Li Yundong and said with envy and admiration, Yundong, you're really smart. You can draw inferences about other things from one instance. You're right. Many Taoist priests pay attention to sexual techniques, which are actually the way of collecting nourishment. In their eyes, women are just medicinal materials and cauldrons, so they never care about their lives. However, this method is really effective, especially after the death of the first leader of the Fox Zen school and the succession of the second leader. At that time, as soon as the pillar of the Fox Zen school passed away, the power of the Fox Zen school was greatly weakened and surrounded by enemies. Therefore, the second leader wanted to quickly improve her strength. At that time, she heard that the Yin-Yang sect of Mount Wuhua had a successful dual cultivation kung fu, so she sneaked into Mount Wuhua and pretended to be a female disciple, secretly learning this kung fu. Speaking of this, Su Chan sighed faintly and said, After the second leader learned this kung fu, she immediately passed it on to her disciples as if she had found a treasure. As a result, almost everyone in the Fox Zen school practiced dual cultivation, and all of them went to the mortal world to find a man with Yuan-Yang body to collect Yang to supplement Yin. In the end, they made the world a mess, making many cultivators think that we are born to be lascivious. Li Jiandong said curiously, But I've been dealing with you for a long time. Whether it's your master Ao Wushuang, Chao Yi, or the others, I've seen that although they all have coquettish faces and romantic figures, they are quite dignified and chaste, and have not done anything dissolute. Su Chan said, That's because after the 2nd and 3rd generation leaders of the Fox Zen school, the 4th generation leader, the mystical Silver Fox, took over the position of leader. At this time, the Fox Zen school was already notorious. It was like a rat crossing the street, being beaten and killed by cultivators. The most terrible thing was that the cultivators of the Fox Zen school found that once their Niden, which had been cultivated by collecting Yang to supplement Yin, met the Niden of the orthodox Shenmen, it almost collapsed at the first touch. At this time, the mystical Silver Fox summed up the experience and lessons of the previous 2 generations of leaders. She believed that although the way of dual cultivation was successful, it lacked tempering and polishing. It was opportunistic and not enough to be the right way. Therefore, she abandoned the kung fu of dual cultivation and turned into an ordinary female disciple. She devoted herself to the Taoists and secretly learned the kung fu of the orthodox Xianmen. However, the kung fu of the way of dual cultivation was too easy to master. It was really a little unbearable to abandon it all at once, so the mystical silver fox improved it. From the physical copulation of a man and a woman to the breathing of a man and a woman, the dual cultivation has since been divided into major dual cultivation and minor dual cultivation, Su Chan said with confidence. In a few words, she clearly explained the reason for the major and minor dual cultivation. She said, "In this way the disciples of the Fox Zen school don't have to risk the world's condemnation to do the harmful thing of collecting yang to supplement yin. Yundong, you also know that if the major dual cultivation is done too much, people will be squeezed into jerky. As the saying goes, lust is a bone-scraping knife. This is exactly the reason." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I understand. This is actually the same as the 8 cycles of fire cultivation technique I practice. My 8 cycles of fire cultivation technique also combines the qi of heart fire with the qi of kidney water in my body, and the yang qi of the right kidney with the yin qi of the left kidney. Therefore, I refined the supreme yin qi from the pure yang qi, and my cultivation quotient jumped from yin spirit to yang spirit. Your spirit dual cultivation also combines the yin and yang qi, and then stimulates the niden in your body to grow and mature, right?" Li Yundong said with a smile. Su Chan nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, the mystical silver fox has modified the major dual cultivation into a minor one. Although the effect is not so obvious, it is much safer. At least, both men and women don't have to be afraid of being picked clean by each other, and they can control their own aura." Li Yundong held Su Chan in his arms and said with a smile, "Then shall we have a small dual cultivation every day?" Su Chan quickly waved her hand and said in a panic, No, absolutely not." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Why not?" "Look, you've only absorbed a little bit of my yang qi and you've changed so much. If you absorb a little more, you'll directly become an immortal." Su Chan shook her head like a rattle drum. She said, No. As the saying goes, dripping water wears through a stone and rope saws wood. Today, I absorbed a little of your yuan-yang jinqi, which is the purest and most essential thing in your body. It's very difficult to cultivate. If I absorb a little, you will lose a little. As the saying goes, the way of heaven is to lose excess and make up for deficiency. It only takes a few seconds for a man to lose his primordial essence, but it will take several days to make up for it. In the same way, the speed at which you lose your jinqi will not be as fast as the speed at which you make up for it. In the long run, your cultivation will definitely regress greatly." Li Yundong didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "What does it matter? As long as my girl is strong, isn't that enough?" Su Chan was moved. She hugged Li Yundong and said softly, "Sir, I appreciate your kindness. You can't spoil me like this. It's not good. Think about it, if it was too easy for me to get the kung fu I'm cultivating now, then I wouldn't have worked hard to cultivate. A niden without hard work is a fake niden. When I meet a master, it will collapse at once. Even if I cultivate niden to become extremely powerful through small dual cultivation, it's still useless when I meet a master." He sighed and said, "You're right. I remember that after I succeeded in the Zhuji phase in the Himalayas, I met Wu Hao. He had obtained the niden through yin-yang dual cultivation. As a result, I spat out a mouthful of jinqi, causing the 5-yang blood pearl to reverse, but his jinqi couldn't blow it at all. Why was there such a big difference between the same mouthful of jinqi? It's because my niden was tempered thousands of times, while his was a man and woman dual cultivation. It's like on one hand, there are veterans who have been through hundreds of battles, and on the other hand, there are old soldiers who are content to enjoy themselves. Although they are both soldiers and can fight with guns, once the bayonet is red, the difference between the two is too big." As Li Yundong spoke, he lowered his head and looked at Su Chan with appreciation and love on his face. He gently stroked her head and said, "Well, my girl is really sensible. She really knows how to improve herself. Good." After receiving Li Yundong's praise, Su Chan's heart was sweeter than honey. She nodded with a smile and said, "Well, I will work hard. When my jinqi is strong and vigorous, I will ask you to teach me the heavenly jindan technique." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Okay." But in his heart he thought, cultivation is about accumulation over time. When Su Chan's jinqi and nigong are cultivated well, I'm afraid it will be too late. No, I have to think of another way. It's a pity that I've already eaten the Renyuan jindan, and the other Renyuan jindan is still missing. However, the Medicine King tripod that Ziyuan mentioned before is indeed a good treasure. But I don't know where it is and I don't know how to refine pills. Li Yundong thought for a while but he couldn't figure it out, so he put the idea to the back of his mind for the time being. He just remembered it in his heart. At dawn the next day, Zhou Qin knocked on Li Yundong's door early in the morning. Li Yundong opened the door and saw that Zhou Qin was dressed in a student's uniform. Ruan Hongling was standing next to her, also dressed in a student's uniform. He asked curiously, "What are you dressed for?" Ruan Hongling laughed and said to Zhou Qin, "I knew it. This guy must have forgotten his other identity, right?" Zhou Qin pursed her lips and smiled. "Master, don't tell me you've forgotten that you still have to go to school? You've been absent for many days and so have I. If I don't go to class I'll be disqualified." Li Yundong patted his forehead and said with a smile, "If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have forgotten. Wait a minute, I'll go out in a minute." After washing up, he was about to go out with Zhou Qin and Ruan Hongling. Su Chan saw him at a glance and jumped over, saying with a smile, "Are you going to school? I want to go too." As soon as she said this, the other little foxes also joined in. "Leader, we want to go too." When Li Yundong saw this, he immediately felt a headache coming on. He thought to himself, "Last time, you almost turned the school upside down. Are you going again this time? How can this be? Do you think I'm going on a spring outing?" Chapter 356. Go to watch net. Li Yundong said with a straight face, "No, do you think I'm going out to play?" Su Chan looked at Li Yundong eagerly, pouted and said, "Didn't you say that I should follow you closely in the future?" The little foxes also joined in and said, "Yes, we must not leave leader's side and follow him closely." Li Yundong scolded them with a smile, "Are you a group of female ghosts? Follow me closely. Go do what you need to do. Don't make trouble." How could the little foxes be willing to do that? They all jeered, "Leader, you can't keep your word. Leader, you can't treat everyone equally." Li Yundong felt as if there were countless bees buzzing in his head. Chao Yi, who was beside him, also persuaded with a smile, "Leader, take them out for a walk. They are looking forward to going out with you. Go to watch net." 7 KOM. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Sherbua Chao Yi, why are you also jeering?" The little foxes cheered, "Long live Sherbua Chao Yi. Long live Sherbua Chao Yi." Chao Yi coughed dryly and glanced at Li Yundong. The little foxes immediately understood and said in unison, "Long live leader. Long live leader." With so many beautiful women begging for mercy, Li Yundong couldn't stand it anymore. He said helplessly, "Okay, but we have to make 3 rules before we go out." When the little foxes heard this, they all laughed and said, "What 3 rules?" Li Yundong raised 3 fingers and said, "First, don't make a scene." As soon as he finished speaking, the little foxes said in unison, "What do you mean by making a scene?" Li Yundong glared at them and said, "This is making a scene." The little foxes were shocked and all shut up. Li Yundong nodded with satisfaction and said, "Second, don't run around." The little foxes had no objection to this rule and nodded in unison. Li Yundong added, "Third, don't call me leader outside." When the little foxes heard this, they immediately asked, "Then what should we call you?" Li Yundong thought for a moment, then said resolutely, "Pretend you don't know me." Hearing this, Su Chan giggled and said, "After what happened last time, it seems unlikely." Li Yundong knew that Su Chan was referring to the speech he gave at the university. "How dare you?" he said, glaring at Su Chan. Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "Anyway, don't call me leader if you have nothing to do. It's not a costume film. It sounds weird to outsiders. If there's anything, just call me by my name." The little foxes looked at each other and nodded. "All right then." Li Yundong saw that although they were well behaved at this time, he felt strange in his heart, as if something was going to happen. However, words that had been said were like spilled water, and they could not be taken back. Li Yundong sighed. "Forget it, let's go. I don't know what I did in my last life to provoke such a large group of people like you." When everyone in the Fox Zen school heard this, they all laughed. At this time, Ziyuan also came in from the opposite door. Seeing that he was about to go out, she asked curiously, "Where are you going?" "You have to go to the store to work on the decoration today." Li Yundong said with a wry smile, "I can't split myself up. Why don't I leave the decoration to you? It's useless for me to go. I don't know anything about this." Ziyuan thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay, that's it." Seeing this, Chao Yi took the initiative to say, "Jinren Ziyuan, why don't I help you?" Ziyuan glanced at Chao Yi and was a little surprised, but she still smiled and said, "Well, I can't do it alone." At this time, Lu Yuehong and Zhuang Yiting of the Fox Zen School said in unison, "Then let's go and help." Li Yundong smiled and said, "That's good. Everyone has something to do. Let's divide the work and cooperate." The group of people laughed. Li Yundong took Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Ruan Hongling, and the little foxes to the school, while Ziyuan and the others went to the store to work on the decoration. When he arrived at the school, Li Yundong looked at the vibrant campus. He suddenly felt that the place he had stayed in for nearly 3 years was so strange. He sighed and said, "I haven't been back for a while. It seems like a century has passed. I've almost forgotten that I'm still a student." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard a voice next to him, with anger and surprise. "You've almost forgotten that you're a student? Have you also forgotten that you have friends like us?" Li Yundong turned his head and saw Feng Na holding a textbook in her arms, looking at him with a mixture of anger and joy. Li Yundong immediately laughed and said, "It's you. Long time no see. How have you been recently?" Feng Na glanced at Li Yundong and said in a drawling tone, "Me? Do you still know me?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Yes, yes, you are the wise and powerful president of the student union of our school." As he said this, Li Yundong said with a smile, "President, long time no see. Are you busy every day?" Feng Na snorted and rolled her eyes at Li Yundong. She said with a little girl's temper, "I'm busy every day, but I can't be compared to some people who are so busy that they can't even be seen. I'm not busy at all. I just go to school and attend meetings every day." Li Yundong smiled even more eagerly and said, "Don't say that, President. You have to take care of yourself. Going to school and attending meetings is very tiring." The more Feng Na talked to Li Yundong, the more she smiled. When she heard this, she couldn't help but burst into laughter and scolded him with a smile, "Hey, what have you been doing these days? Why haven't I seen you? Sun Li has come to me several times. She said that if you don't go to class, you'll have to take a makeup exam again." Li Yundong sighed with a deep look on his face. Feng Na asked curiously and with concern, "What's wrong? What's wrong? Tell me what's on your mind. If you don't say it, do you not regard me as a friend?" Li Yundong looked up at the sky and sighed. "Alas, these days I can't eat or sleep well when I think about something. I can't sleep. I'm so anxious." His words made Ruan Hongling, Zhou Qin, and Su Chan come over curiously and ask, "Li Yundong, what are you thinking about? Do you have to be so exaggerated? Yundong, what are you thinking about? Tell us, we can help you share some of the burden." "Mom." "Li Yundong, what's on your mind?" Li Yundong glanced at them and sighed. "Alas, you can't help me. Don't ask." After that he sighed. But the more Li Yundong didn't say anything, the more curious they became. They all urged him, say it, say it. There are no outsiders here." Li Yundong couldn't resist, so he sighed and said with a compassionate expression, "Every night, as long as I think about the fact that the motherland has not been unified and the world has not been peaceful, I can't eat or sleep well." Before he could finish his words, everyone burst into laughter. Feng Na laughed and spat, "Bah, have you been busy saving world peace these days?" Su Chan giggled but didn't say anything. Zhou Qin covered her mouth and didn't interrupt. Only Ruan Hongling laughed and scolded, "Li Yundong, you are too thick-skinned." Her voice was clear, and as soon as it came out, it immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding students. When many people heard Li Yundong's name, their ears suddenly pricked up. "Li Yundong? Where is he? Is he the Li Yundong who no one knows and has been wandering around Tianan in vain? Damn Jinren Li, I can't believe I saw him in person in this school. Am I hallucinating?" "Fellow Taoist, you're not hallucinating. This is the legend of our school, Li Yundong Jinren Li, who is known as a pear blossom suppressing a begonia, and who is against eating shit without hesitation." These students whispered to each other for a while, and some of them simply shouted at Li Yundong, "Li Yundong, fuck you." These students, who had experienced the last incident in the school playground, all laughed. Li Yundong was not angry. He turned his head and said to Feng Na and the others with a wry smile, "Hurry up and go to the classroom. It's going to be crowded here." Sure enough, after a while the news of Li Yundong's appearance on the campus spread, and in a short time, it had spread all over the campus. Many people who had never seen Li Yundong before were curious. "I've heard his name so much that my ears have become calloused. I've seen all kinds of photos and videos on the forum, but I've never seen him in person. Let's go and have a look." For a moment, these students all clustered around Li Yundong and followed him. The large group of people was like a torrent. Li Yundong smiled bitterly to himself. He turned his head to look at Feng Na and said, "Do you know why I don't come to school anymore?" Feng Na covered her mouth and said with a smile, "That's because you don't come often, so when the students see you, they find it strange and come to see you in person." Li Yundong laughed exaggeratedly and said, "Oh, so they usually look at my body, don't they?" Feng Na laughed. She patted Li Yundong on the shoulder and said, "I happen to have no classes this morning. I'll accompany you to a class." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I think you just want to see me have a good time." Feng Na giggled. "You found out. Well, I just want to see you have a good time. What do you think? Are you going to drive me away?" Li Yundong sighed and said, "Alas, I'm such a low-key person, but you just have to applaud and scream for me. It's really embarrassing." After that, the people around him burst into laughter again. The little foxes had been looking at the people around them curiously. They quietly pulled Su Chan's arm, pulled her aside and whispered, "Su Chan, is leader so prestigious here?" Su Chan said proudly, "Of course. Didn't you see how many people responded to his call on the stage last time?" Only then did the little foxes remember what had happened last time. They said with pride, "It's a good thing that leader is so popular. It means that our leader is very outstanding. It seems that our Fox Zen school will definitely flourish in his hands in the future." Su Chan nodded like a chick pecking at rice. "Yes, Yundong has always been outstanding." Li Yundong saw that Su Chan and the little foxes were whispering to each other, and he suddenly had an idea. He quickly called Su Chan over and asked as if he was facing a formidable enemy, "Hey, what are you talking about? You're not going to do something again, are you?" Su Chan immediately cried out in grievance. "I didn't. We were just praising you just now, okay?" Li Yundong looked suspicious and kept looking at Su Chan, as if he wanted to find some clues from her face. He said doubtfully, "Really?" Su Chan said firmly, "Of course not. You're thinking too much." Li Yundong patted her head and said, "That's good. I was afraid that you guys would get together and cause me trouble. You guys are a group of troublemakers." Su Chan pouted and made a face at Li Yundong. At this time, Feng Na turned her wrist to look at her watch and said, "Let's go. It's time for class. We have a big classical class this morning." Li Yundong saw that there were so many students around that there were signs of traffic congestion. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Let's go and grab seats." "I'll help you collect the tickets and do some publicity." Li Yundong's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He thought, "By the way, Feng Na can come and help me open the tea room. Should I tell her?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and thought to himself, "Let's talk about it later. What if I lose money then? Wouldn't that be utterly humiliating?" At this time, the teacher who walked into the classroom was also shocked by the students in the classroom. He couldn't help but get excited. "I've been teaching for so many years. When has it not been sparse and many students have run away in the middle of the class? Since when are there so many people? Today there are really no empty seats. What is happiness? Happiness is that cats eat fish, dogs eat meat and Ultraman fights monsters every day. Isn't the teacher's happiness counting on the students in the classroom to listen to his class every day?" The teacher of the classical class was surnamed Hua. He was an old pedant with a head full of gray hair. He was so excited that his blood was boiling as if his youth, which he hadn't seen for many years, had returned to his body. Mr. Hua coughed on the podium and said excitedly, "Students, let's start the class now." The students under the podium were chattering and whispering, as if they hadn't seen him at all. Mr. Hua was suddenly in a difficult position. He looked embarrassed and said a little louder, "Students, it's time to start the class." But the voices below did not diminish. Instead they became louder. Mr. Hua could hear them clearly from above. Some of the girls were chattering and saying, "Hey, which one is Li Yundong? Well, there's the 10th person in the back row. Can't you recognize him? He's so easy to recognize. He's sitting in the middle of a group of beautiful women. Ah, it's true. This time I finally saw him in person. Last time I didn't see him clearly on the rostrum, but I heard that he objected to us eating sh*teach. Bah, you're the one eating sh*t. Mr. Hua was very depressed. He thought to himself, "It turns out that so many students aren't here for my class, are they? Are they all here for Li Yundong? Isn't this too hurtful?" Mr. Hua felt as if someone had poured a basin of cold water on the enthusiasm in his heart. His heart was cold, but on second thought he thought, "No, what is a teacher for? Isn't it just to educate students? The more it is like this, the more I have to educate these students." Mr. Hua regained his confidence on the podium and thought to himself, I don't believe that the content of my lecture can't attract you. Ignoring the noise under the podium, he began to teach with a wireless microphone. The sound of the lecture was loud and piercing, making the students grimace. They covered their ears and said one after another, F***CK, is the teacher on drugs or cheating today? Why is he speaking so loudly? Immediately a student shouted, Teacher, your voice is too loud. We can't stand it. Mr. Hua said leisurely on the podium, If I don't speak louder, how can I cover you? The students under the podium burst into laughter. After a while, the order in the classroom was much better. Seeing this, Mr. Hua immediately became energetic. He tried his best to teach on the podium, but his words were extravagant and his saliva was flying everywhere. Li Yundong didn't want to listen to the lecture. He just wanted to be there so that he wouldn't be expelled if he skipped classes too many times. That would be a great injustice. Being expelled was a small matter. At that time, his parents' monthly benefits would be cut off, and he hadn't earned a single grain of rice. If he lost money in his business, there would be no way out. He would really have to take the little foxes to open a circus. Li Yundong was listening in his seat, but it was the first time the little foxes had attended such a class. They were very excited and sat upright, just like they were attending an old teacher's class in a private school. Mr. Hua looked down from the podium. He could see clearly who was listening carefully, who was whispering, who was putting on makeup, and who was texting. He thought to himself, it's rare that these girls are so beautiful and so serious in class. It's rare. Mr. Hua seemed to be encouraged. He spoke more and more energetically. When he got to the point where he was excited, he would casually recite poems and shake his head. He really had the air of an old teacher in a private school. Even though Su Chan had attended a few similar classes with Li Yundong, she had always envied him for being able to attend such a big school. She paid close attention to the class, especially when the teacher stood on the podium and began to talk about the relationship between ancient literati and flowers. She listened with great interest. She listened to the class with great interest. Seeing that Su Chan was listening so attentively, Li Yundong smiled and nudged her arm with his elbow. Hey, is it really that good? Su Chan giggled. It's good. It's very eye-opening. At this time, the teacher on the podium was talking about the relationship between scholars and chrysanthemums. When he talked about the works of Tao Yuanming, Lu Yu, and other famous writers, he simply shook his head and recited a poem. The autumn silk lingers around the house like the Tao family, all around the fence is slanting day by day. It is not that the chrysanthemum is preferred among flowers, but that when the flower blooms, there will be no more flowers. Li Yundong listened to the teacher recite the poem enthusiastically, and suddenly laughed. He said to Su Chan with a smirk, By the way, do you know why scholars like to sing about chrysanthemums? Of course I do, Su Chan said confidently. Do you think that your girl is uncultured? Chrysanthemums are fresh and elegant, noble and pure, the flower of a gentleman. Therefore, ancient scholars used chrysanthemums as a metaphor to show their nobility and the heart of a gentleman. Li Yundong shook his head with a smirk. No, that's nonsense. Su Chan's mouth opened wide. She asked in confusion. That's not right. What kind of reason is that? Li Yundong laughed. Why do scholars like chrysanthemums? Su Chan blinked. What? Li Yundong said word by word in a serious tone, because they are all hardcore. As soon as Li Yundong finished speaking, Feng Na couldn't help but burst out laughing. As soon as she laughed out loud, she immediately felt that it was inappropriate. She quickly covered her mouth, turned her head to the side and held back her laughter, her shoulders shrugging. Li Yundong ridiculed her with a fake smile. Feng Na, you actually understand? You have a heavy taste. Feng Na laughed until her stomach hurt. She didn't care about Li Yundong's words. Su Chan was confused. She stared blankly and kept thinking about Li Yundong's words. Why do scholars like chrysanthemums have a heavy taste? What kind of logic is this? Feng Na's previous laughter was very abrupt in the classroom, and Mr. Hua, who was on the podium, was very unhappy. He thought to himself, Girl, why are you so unruly in class? Look at the girls behind you. How obedient they are. Mr. Hua was unhappy. After reciting the chrysanthemum poem, he asked, Does anyone know whose poem I just recited? What's its name? Many of the students under the podium peeked at Li Yundong and the beauties beside him from time to time. Some of them were catching up on sleep, some were playing with their mobile phones, and some were putting on makeup. Only a few of them were listening to the class. For a moment, the classroom was quiet. Almost everyone looked at each other. In addition, the poem was relatively obscure, so no one knew where it came from. Mr. Hua snorted and thought to himself, "You guys are not good students if you don't listen carefully in class. Look at the ones behind you who are so serious. At first glance you can tell that they are good students. They must know." After that, Mr. Hua pointed to the little foxes in the back row and said, "The fifth student from the right in the back row, stand up." Li Yundong was stunned. He looked back and saw that the fifth student from the right in the back row was a little fox from the Fox Zen School. The little fox looked at Li Yundong first, then stood up in confusion and looked at the teacher blankly. Mr. Hua asked kindly, "Student, do you know the source of this poem?" The little fox thought to herself, "I know, but leader didn't let us talk before." So she shook her head. Mr. Hua was greatly shocked. He looked depressed and pointed to the little fox next to him. "What about you? Do you know?" Another little fox also stood up. She saw that her Shiji hadn't spoken before, so of course she couldn't speak either. She also shook her head in silence. Mr. Hua was depressed. He didn't believe it, so he called up the little foxes next to them one by one. As a result, all of them shook their heads in silence. Mr. Hua was angry and couldn't help shouting, "Why don't you know anything? How are you in class? Look at all of you, each and every one of you is so pretty, but why is your head so empty?" The little foxes felt wronged and thought to themselves, "We're not your students. We know, but leader won't let us say it." Mr. Hua was so angry on the podium that he was gasping for breath. Su Chan secretly felt that it was unfair. She thought to herself, "This teacher, if you scold my fellow disciples, isn't that the same as scolding me? It doesn't matter if you scold me, but aren't you scolding my Yundong in a roundabout way? He is our leader. If we are scolded, he will also lose face. No, I have to fight for Yundong." Thinking of this, Su Chan threw everything else out of her mind. She stretched out her hand and said loudly, "Mr. Hua, I know." Li Yundong was shocked and pulled her back. "Hey, don't talk nonsense." Seeing Li Yundong's action, Mr. Hua immediately shouted, "Li Yundong, if you don't say it yourself, why don't you let other students say it?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He wanted to say, "She's my girlfriend, not a student here." However, he saw that the teacher was in a fit of anger. If he were to say something like that, it might cause another storm, so he swallowed the words back down. Mr. Hua pointed at Su Chan and said loudly, "Student, don't be afraid. Stand up and answer the question loudly." Seeing that Li Yundong was no longer stopping her, Su Chan jumped up and said loudly, "This poem was written by Yuan Zhen of the Tang dynasty. It's called Chrysanthemum." Everyone in the classroom looked at Su Chan in unison, and there was a lot of discussion for a while. Mr. Hua was relieved. *M, finally someone knows the source of this poem. It's not easy. Mr. Hua's face was full of relief. Seeing that Su Chan had answered without thinking, he wanted to test her again, so he asked, "Do you know why ancient literati loved chrysanthemums?" When Li Yundong heard this, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He opened his mouth wide and thought to himself, "No way, how could there be such a coincidence?" Hearing this, Su Chan thought, Isn't this the question Yundong just asked?" The little girl was overjoyed. Without thinking, she said loudly, "Because they all have a strong taste." Chapter 358. Go to watch net. As soon as Su Chan said this, the whole classroom fell silent in an instant. It was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Go to watch net. Everyone looked at Su Chan with their mouths agape. The teacher standing on the podium was even more dumbfounded, and his temples were beating wildly. Li Yundong was even more frantic in his heart. *CK, you speak too fast. I can't even stop you." This silence only lasted for a moment, and then there was a burst of amazing laughter in the classroom. The laughter was like thunder on the ground, almost lifting the roof. Su Chan was confused by everyone's laughter. She looked around blankly and said, "Did I say something wrong?" Mr. Hua, who was on the podium, suppressed his anger and said, "Student, if you don't know, then you don't know. Don't make trouble in class." Su Chan said loudly, "I know. It was Yundong who told me." After that, she reached out and pointed at Li Yundong, and all the eyes in the classroom turned to Li Yundong. Li Yundong suddenly burst into tears. He thought to himself, "Girl, I've known you for so long. Why do you always make trouble for me every time you come to school?" Su Chan didn't react at first, but she soon found that something was wrong, especially when she looked at Li Yundong. Li Yundong's expression was as if he wanted to find a hole to hide in. Su Chan's heart skipped a beat. She thought to herself, "Oh no, did I say something wrong again?" But I said it according to what Yundong told me. The little girl felt wronged and puzzled. She lowered her head and timidly glanced at Li Yundong. Then she timidly glanced at the students around her, who were laughing wildly. Her head was getting lower and lower, and in the end, it seemed that she wanted to bury it in her chest. Mr. Hua's veins were bulging on the podium. He said, "Student, please sit down. Student Li Yundong, please stand up." "Oh," Su Chan said and sat down timidly. She glanced at Li Yundong again, only to see that he was looking at her with a tearless expression. He said in a low voice, "Little girl, I'm in trouble because of you." Su Chan lowered her head even more. "Oh," she said, sitting in her seat, muttering in her heart, "What did I do wrong? Why was everyone laughing like that?" As soon as Li Yundong stood up, the students in the classroom cheered loudly. Not only the students in the classroom, but even the corridor outside was full of students. They had all heard the news and wanted to see Li Yundong's elegant demeanor. Fortunately, Li Yundong didn't let them down. He had put on a good show. For a moment, the students inside and outside the classroom were excited. Countless faces were pressed against the glass windows of the classroom, and countless phones were turned on to the camera function, recording every movement in the classroom. In the face of such cheers, Li Yundong felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He smiled dryly and said to Mr. Hua, who was as pale as the bottom of a pot on the podium, "Mr. Hua, actually." Before he could finish, Mr. Hua shouted angrily, "Don't talk. Listen to me." In the face of his teacher's outburst, Li Yundong tactfully shut his mouth. Teacher Hua said loudly, "I know you are a celebrity student in this school, but please respect my profession. Please respect my identity. I'm the teacher. As long as you're teaching in this class, you're my student." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and thought to himself, "How could I not respect you?" Seeing that Li Yundong didn't speak, Mr. Hua said again, "Weren't you very talkative just now? Come on, come to the podium. You give the lecture and I'll be your student, okay? Come on, especially the problem of heavy taste." After that, he walked down the podium angrily and stood under the podium. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just as he was about to speak, he heard the students inside and outside the classroom roaring with laughter. One by one they shouted, "Li Yundong, we support you." The noise was like a huge wave, so loud that it almost drowned everyone. Seeing these students jeering like this, Mr. Hua became even angrier. He held the wireless microphone and sneered, "Go, make it clear. You should also experience the feeling of being a teacher. If you don't come up, the whole class will get 0 points in the exam." As soon as this was said, the students suddenly burst into an uproar, especially the students who wanted such credits. They all looked at Li Yundong eagerly, as if they were looking at Guanyin Bodhisattva, who had saved them from suffering. Seeing that he had been forced into a corner, Li Yundong had no choice but to bite the bullet and walk to the podium. He coughed dryly and said, "Actually, this is a misunderstanding." Mr. Hua interrupted him with a sneer and said, "We don't want to hear a misunderstanding. We want to hear a heavy explanation." The students immediately burst into laughter again and clamored, "We want to hear a hardcore explanation." Li Yundong was sweating profusely. He felt that he would rather face the siege of all the sects than this scene in front of him. Li Yundong wiped his cold sweat and said quickly, "In fact, there have been many poets who have written about chrysanthemums in China for 5,000 years, but the most famous one is Tao Yuanming. He wrote the famous sentence, picking chrysanthemums under the eastern fence, leisurely seeing the southern mountain. Bai Juyi of the Tang dynasty also wrote the poem, Only chrysanthemums under the eastern fence can withstand the cold, and the golden millet is clearer at dawn. Huang Chao also left behind the beautiful sentence, Soaring incense array penetrates Chang'an, and the whole city is covered with golden armor. Li Yundong counted the poets who had written chrysanthemum poems one by one as if they were his family treasures. For a moment the students quieted down. They didn't know why Li Yundong was criticizing these poets and their poems one by one. They were curious, so they listened to him quietly. Although Mr. Hua was angry, he secretly nodded in his heart. Not bad, he has read a lot of books. No wonder he is so famous in school. It seems that the last time he and Yen Hua debated about Dharma should not be a false rumor. Li Yundong said again, there are many poems about chrysanthemums, such as Su Shi's Qingji Ruobing Gu Sanyu, and the golden stamen will flow with rosy clouds. If you want to know the old trillium, it will bloom when all the grass is destroyed. Another example is Li Bai's lamentable chrysanthemum in the eastern fence. The stem is sparse and the leaves are small. Although the words are different, they have their own fragrance. Another example is Du Fu's The Cold Flowers Have Bloomed, and the chrysanthemum is alone. The old plucking people frequently change, and the fragrant wine temporarily follows. Li Yundong listed these poets who had written chrysanthemum poems like a machine gun, without stopping at all. The students were all knowledgeable people. For a moment, everyone secretly applauded Li Yundong's strong memory. But at the same time they became more and more confused. Why did Li Yundong list so many poets and poems that have written chrysanthemum poems? What does this have to do with heavy taste? While they were wondering, Li Yundong said, "Look, among these poets, Tao Yuanming is from Chaisang County in Xuanyang of the Eastern Jin Dynasty, which is now Jiangxi. Bai Juyi is from Hunan, Huang Chao is from Shandong, Su Dongpa is from Sichuan, Li Bai is also from Sichuan, and Du Fu is also from Hunan. Jiangxi cuisine is heavy in color and thick in taste, and people like chili, not to mention Sichuan cuisine, which is famous for its spiciness. Shandong is famous for its Shandong cuisine, which is also characterized by saltiness and freshness, and salt is used to bring out the freshness of dishes. Hunan cuisine is not to mention, fresh and fragrant is its characteristic. Look, I have listed so many people, and the dishes in their places are basically quite heavy, so I say that they all have heavy taste." After Li Yundong finished speaking, he only felt that his head was covered with sweat, as if he had fought with 100 Yuaning stage masters for 500 rounds. When these students heard Li Yundong's nonsense, they immediately laughed, whistled, and cheered one after another. Mr. Hua was originally angry in his heart, but after listening to Li Yundong's nonsense, he couldn't help but smile. He nodded and thought to himself, although this guy is talking nonsense without a solid foundation in ancient Chinese and an extraordinary reaction, he won't be able to make up for it. Some of the curious girls in the classroom stared at Li Yundong with starry eyes. They couldn't help but say, "Before, I only knew that Li Yundong was strong and brave, but today I know that he is also a romantic and elegant scholar. He is really good at both the pen and the sword. Where can I find a boy like him? What a pity. Idiot, didn't you see him argue with Yan Hua about Buddhism last time? Who can understand that? But didn't you see him recite chrysanthemum poems just now? Wow, he's so stylish. He's so handsome. F***CK, can't you help getting excited when you hear the word chrysanthemum? Do you also have a heavy taste?" A boy next to them couldn't help sighing when he heard their infatuation. What is amazing? He can win countless fans by bragging for a while and make a group of beautiful girls fall in love with him. They are even willing to marry him. This is amazing. What do you know? You don't know these poems. Show me. Alas, I didn't know until today that even reciting poems can be used to pick up girls. You have to read, children. There are beauties in books. The ancients didn't deceive me. Li Yundong braced himself and gave a random explanation. Although it was barely justifiable, Mr. Huan nodded secretly under the podium, thinking that this matter would be over. However, the students who were watching the fun did not intend to let him go. Some students clamored, "Mr. Li, let's do something exciting." As soon as these students clamored, the students inside and outside the classroom also followed suit. "Let's do something exciting." Li Yundong cursed in his heart, "Damn it, you guys are really taking pleasure in my misfortune. I've solved such a perverted problem, but you still refuse to let me go. Well, if you don't let me have an easy time, I won't let you have an easy time." Li Yundong made up his mind. "In for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound." He said loudly, "Do you want something exciting?" The eyes of these birdmen lit up and they nodded excitedly. Yes, yes, we want something exciting." Li Yundong waved his hand and said, "Well, now put away all the books. Let's take the exam." Everyone was dumbfounded. A student in the front row stammered, "Test, test?" Li Yundong glanced at them and said with a matter-of-fact expression, "Don't you want to be excited? Isn't the exam exciting enough?" These students suddenly burst out laughing. Even Mr. Hua, who had been keeping a straight face, couldn't help laughing. A curious student asked, "Mr. Li, what's the content of the exam?" Li Yundong didn't even think about it. He said loudly, "It's about the relationship between scholars singing chrysanthemum and heavy taste." After he finished speaking, he seemed to think of something and added, "You're not allowed to plagiarize and use my explanation just now." There was another burst of laughter outside the classroom. Mr. Hua also laughed and scolded, "Sly?" The class could no longer go on. Mr. Hua shook his head helplessly and said, "Forget it, I'll let you go today. Don't make trouble next time." Li Yundong felt as if he had been granted amnesty. He quickly said seriously, "Please rest assured, Mr. Hua. I will live up to the ardent expectations of the party and the people in the future. I will study hard, make progress every day, and strive to be a new person in the construction of the motherland. The crowd burst into laughter again. After the disturbance of the class, Li Yundong waited until the class was over. After he walked out of the classroom, Zhou Qin and Ruan Hongling kept whispering, glancing at Li Yundong from time to time, and bursting into laughter from time to time. The little foxes were all arrogant, as if their leader had just done something earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Only Su Chan lowered her head and rubbed the corners of her clothes with her hands. She didn't dare to raise her head to look at Li Yundong. Seeing her like this, Li Yundong wanted to teach her a lesson, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. He decided to wait until they got back. The group of people walked out of the teaching building. Ruan Hongling was talking to Zhou Qin when she suddenly saw an acquaintance out of the corner of her eye. She said to Zhou Qin and Li Yundong, "Wait a minute, I have something to do." As she said this, she ran away and shouted at a boy from afar, "Yinhua, stop right there." Li Yundong glanced over and thought to himself, "Hey, didn't she always hate and dislike this guy? Sorry, I went out for dinner so the update is late. Tonight's third update is still the same, that you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.